Imagine someone talking about the Nick Rekieta stuff going on, right? And they blame the kids. Probably the only people in the whole thing, including Aaron and April and Nick and Kayla, probably the only people that don't deserve any blame. They blame the kids. I'll show it to you in just a second. Phil's trying to take credit for a hack that happened, I guess, back in the summer on a bunch of routers. Who knows?
What you think about when you're born into a fire? Let 'em burn, let 'em burn.
What's up, Southern Belle?
Sell 'em to the richest buyer. They wanna let the world decay. They tell us lies and fade away, fade away. We feel betrayed. We were raised to lose the race. Wake at the back of the pack, kill it anyway. Listen up now, because we're never dropping out. Beat the odds, beat the big house. The brains are bigger than the doubt. We've been thinking for ourselves, never let the truth fade away. This is bigger than ourselves, we won't let the world burn away, burn away. We feel betrayed. We were raised to lose the race. Wake at the back of the pack, kill it anyway. To blame, haters face the world's mistakes. Wake at the back of the pack, kill it anyway. And we feel betrayed. We were raised to lose the race. Wake at the back of the pack, kill it anyway. To blame, haters face the world's mistakes. Wake at the back of the pack, kill it anyway.
Pretty good timing there, huh? Austin was spotted the other day. I don't know if you guys know this, but Austin was finally spotted in chat, or someone has the Austin account. We still can't confirm he's alive. We need maybe a video clip of him as Mort and Ramesh and Austin with a newspaper with tomorrow's date on it. You guys ever remember there was a show? We'll talk about it in a minute. Roll the intro.
Hey Daddies, it's me, the Linda Binda from TikTok. I wanted to make this video because I wanted to thank you for watching Cold Beer Confessionals with Will Bird. I think that's just incredible. I've watched a few episodes and I'm just very intrigued. But you know what I'm most intrigued in is Big Daddy's meat stick. I heard that it's very thick, like a good old German sausage. you know, Linda and her coochie loves that. Oh, never mind. Let's not go there. Anyways, I hope you have a good show and enjoy it as you can. There's a lot of weird things that go on, especially when it comes from the realm of Linda Bindaland. So, enjoy the show. Thanks for watching. Peace out.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Will Bird. This is Cold Beer Confessional. Thank you for joining us. Welcome. What I was saying was, I said Austin needs a video of him, blah, 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 whatever. There was a show called Early Edition, I think. You guys remember that? The guy it was like a sitcom on like CBS or something, and he would get the newspaper early, and there would be like some type of travesty or something going on, like an emergency or some type of and he would have to try to stop it. Like they're gonna blow up a baseball stadium, or this person's a bunch of people are gonna die in a house fire, or he got the newspaper the night before or day before, and he'd have to stop it. And he was like the only person that got the newspaper early. When he tried to show it to other people, it was like it wasn't real, or they couldn't see it or something. I don't know what it was. It was a weird show. But I remember watching it as a kid. We didn't have obviously Netflix and shit, so it was like whatever was on. I only got 2 channels in my bedroom because they were on. I was on an antenna, and so I got 5 and 11, which was CBS and NBC local, CBS and NBC. So that was the sitcoms we watched. So there you go. Welcome everybody. Like I said, I'm Will Bird. This is Cold Beer Confessional. Thank you for joining us again. We got some Nick Rekieta drama. Okay, this is another clip from the Keno Casino guys. That'd be PPP and Andy Worski. But it's interesting. There's a guy named Ethan Van Scriver, and he's blaming the kids for the situation Nick is in. I saw one of his tweets earlier, which made me find this clip. One of his tweets said, "Isn't it interesting that the kids would rather wear dirty clothes than learn how to do laundry?" Check this out.
This is actually going to be good for the kids, okay? In a way, it is. They're going to grow up to be,
good for them.
More self-reliant, as long as they can,
It's called, you give your kids chores to make them self-reliant and learn, skills, right? You don't do
your parents having crackhead orgies is good for you.
fucking drugs and have orgies and become I feel like I'm crazy town. I'm in crazy town right now.
It really is crazy town. So let's start here.
Oh. Before we get started here, that was just the little intro. Does anybody own, if you see this later, if you want to leave a comment, does anybody ever own, so there's a Taurus Judge, and then the smaller one is called the Public Defender. I'm thinking about buying a Public Defender. Today, I got attacked by bald-faced hornets, then a copperhead, and then a cottonmouth, like a water moccasin, I think. No. So it was bald-faced hornets. Then I saw a copperhead, but it shot in the water before I could kill it. Then yellow jackets. Then I don't know. I went ahead. It was acting like a cottonmouth, so I killed it. It could have been a water snake, but water snakes apparently act like cottonmouths. All I know is it wanted to fight. It was little, but it wanted to fight instead of run. And even the copperhead ran, right? It wanted to fight instead of run, and it did what a cottonmouth does. It throws its mouth open. It cools up on itself, throws its mouth open, and it was all white. So I killed sent it to its maker. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe it was a water snake. It's so hard to tell. Like when you look at Google at like patterns, like trying to identify a snake, they're giving you like the best case scenario pictures. But snakes have all kinds of variants. So like you can't look at the color. You can kind of look at the pattern, but just roughly, because the pattern can be different sizes and shapes, and the colors are often crazy different. Like you can have a copperhead all the way from fucking copper to brown, and the patterns can be like ridiculously different. It's just hard to keep up with. So it could have just been a water snake pretending to be like a harmless, non-venomous water snake, pretending to be a cottonmouth, but I dispatched it. So it's been a hell of a day. The bald-faced hornets, I actually made a TikTok video about it. If I would have been weed eating down the hill, I was actually in the pond, like weed eating back up the hill, like on the pond side uphill. If I'd have been weed eating downhill like I usually do, I'd have never seen their nest. I'd have never seen it. It was like on a milkweed, like stalk, and they built their nest around it. And it was probably, I don't know, it's probably about a little bit bigger than a softball, I guess. Not as big as a basketball, a little bit bigger than a softball. On a milkweed stalk, and that's where I was weeding at. I just so happened to be on the down, like I was going down, then coming back up, then going down, and I happened to be on the downside of it. And yeah, bald-faced hornet. They're like white and black. They look like a regular hornet, but they're white and black. Hold on, I showed it to you. Anyways, I just happened to see it, but like the camouflage they had, see them here. I guess they call them bald face, not because they're bald, because they're white, so it makes it look like bald. But they build like a paper-looking nest, like most hornets. But it had built it on a stalk of like milkweed or whatever you want to call it. I've heard that shit called everything, but they hurt. They fucking hurt. God, they sting. So when I went downstream, I just happened to see it on the backside of the plant. But if I'd have been on the other side of the plant, Jesus Christ, I'd have never seen it. And I'd have cut it down and hit the ground, and they'd all come out. Then I found a yellow jacket's nest after I weeded an area. So I had weeded beside like some railroad ties. And this one, there, I'll draw you a picture. You guys know how much I love drawing, right? I'll draw you a picture because this is actually really weird. Usually a weed eater or mower will send like yellow jackets. Fucking crazy, right? They'll come out and attack instantly, but not this one. It was actually in a weird space, a weird thing. So there was like there you go, picture time with Will. There was like let's see, let's get some green. So let's call this the ground, right? I should have made that bigger. Let's call this the ground. There we go. And then there was a railroad tie that was there, but it was like this end was like on the ground, and then this end kind of lifted up about 2 or 3 inches, and there was a railroad tie. Okay, and I was just doing my thing. I was weed eating through here, just like I'd already weed eated this area. There was weeds right up against the railroad tie. But about, I guess about halfway, I guess it was in the ground. Like, I couldn't see part of it, right? I could only see, like, a portion of it. But, like, halfway in the ground and halfway up into this board, I could just see, like, this area that I'm going to color in. I could just see this area, and it looked like a bee's nest. And I'm assuming part of it was underground, and it looked like part of it went up into the log. Just a portion of it was exposed. So I'd already weeded this area, no bees. So, of course, I thought, like, that must be, like, last year's nest, or they didn't come back. Because yellow jackets typically all die in the winter. They actually get more aggressive. If you don't know this, here's a tip. Yellow jackets are more aggressive towards the end of summer. That's when you can just walk by and they'll sting you. You don't need a lawnmower or make a lot of noise or move something. You can just walk by. And scientists believe, like, they know their life is, something's going on. They know something's going on. So they're defending more ferociously because they feel like they're always under attack or they're going to die or something's wrong. So anyways, I weed eated through here, and then I started fighting with snakes. And I came back to pick up my weed eater, and I was like, oh, that's a nest right there. So I had the weed eater, like, strapped around my shoulder. It's like it's got like the bicycle handle, the biplane handles, like the 2 handles. It's like a heavy duty weed eater. But I was like, oh, that must be an old nest because they didn't attack me. And I took the weed eater net. Okay, here's the nest. I took the head of the weed eater as my hand, and I just went boop, like just barely touched it, just like boop, right, just to see if it would like fall apart because I thought it was old. When I booped it, bees came out of every. They were coming out of the dirt. They were coming out of the fucking the railroad tie. They're coming out of the fucking grass. I think some of them were like called home from like out in the fields where they were working and collecting pollen and shit. They were fucking everywhere. And I'm trying to run on a bank with the weed eater fucking bouncing around my neck. in half in the pond, half in the grass, in a dead fat guy sprint. I know I don't sprint like I used to, but it was all I could do. Okay, I just fucking dipped the fuck out, turned and ran. But it wasn't very conducive to running. I got popped a couple times on the back of the neck. And yellow jackets, I don't know if all hornets do this. Yellow jackets for sure. They release a pheromone when they sting you that basically says, this guy's the enemy, he's dangerous, everybody sting him. So you can't, unless you go shower or I guess wait it out enough, you can't go back to the nest. Because if you've ever fucked with yellow jackets, you know this. If you ever got stung by yellow jackets, you'll get stung like 5 feet away from the nest. Then when you try to go back to like fucking kill them because you're mad, you want some revenge, it's like 30 feet away. They start fucking coming to you. That's like a pheromone they release that like they target you, right? And they're smart too. They'll go, if you're spraying them with like bee spray, they'll go for your hands. They like trace the foam spray back to you and they go for your hands. And then if you don't have glasses on, they'll come for your eyes. You know how so many fucking people get stung like on the eyebrow or eyelid or whatever, and we see pictures of them all the time? They literally go for your eyes. That's like a tactic they have. So all I did was boop it. And like I guarantee you, if I didn't hit them with the weed eater string, I was like, because I weeded it underneath this where it's lifted up. I weeded it underneath this. There's some weeds growing out, or I wouldn't have been able to see the nest. So if I didn't hit it with the weed eater string, I guarantee you I was like millimeters away. Okay. But then when I booped them, the boop just barely touched the nest. That's when they decided to come out. I saw a copperhead. It had a frog by the leg. And I noticed, I didn't see the copperhead because it was camouflaged pretty good. I noticed the frog acting weird. It was like kind of rolling while I was like trying to jump. And I'm like, what the fuck? I thought I hit it with the weed eater. So there was like a weed between me and the frog, and I was just going to go ahead and hit that weed, and hopefully the frog would jump away. That's when the snake noped the fuck out. It spit the frog out and dove into the fucking pond. Went under like an underwater algae bed, never to be seen again. I probably should have killed that one, but that's the one I missed. And then when I came back around to see if I could find the copperhead again, it was like I know I didn't misidentify the copperhead. It was like when you Google copperhead, it was like the picture that pops up. It was like dead on. But when I came back looking for the copperhead, that's when I found the water snake or cottonmouth or whatever the fuck it was. It took some actions that cost it its life. It's been a rough day, okay? Nature's not on my side. I feel like I'm constantly finding it. So anyways, I'm going to buy a Taurus. This is all set up I'm going to buy a Taurus, not the Judge, which has the longer barrel, I think, but the Public Defender. It's 410, 45 long Colt. I can carry it around in my pocket and a little holster and then blast these motherfuckers because right now I don't want to carry a Glock, right? Because you can't get rat shot is really hard to feed through a semi-automatic pistol because the end of the round is like plastic to hold the pellets in, and you got a feed ramp that the rounds hit. So when it hits it, that's how it loads up in. Like it hits it and pushes it up. So basically, like if you want rat shot, you need like a revolver. I don't even own a revolver, so that flamethrowing robot probably would work. So I don't know if anybody's owned a Taurus Public Defender, got good or bad reviews about it. Let me know. I know they're not as popular now as when they came out. They're actually a lot cheaper. I found some for under $400 new, which I'll probably try to buy a used one, but under $400 new. So I'm going to try to buy one and just throw some 410 in it with like some bird shot. That'll fucking destroy. I'm going to have a snake gun, I guess is what I'm saying. I'm going to have a snake gun. So we'll see how that works out. Anyways, back to the Nick Rekieta shit. So Ethan Van Scriver is blaming it on the kids. Here's some of his quotes and shit.
Yes. I can go into just go to 0. All right.
We've got bear spray. We've actually got dogs. So the neighbor campground, their dogs have become a nuisance, like tearing out trash and bothering people. And at our campground, all dogs had to be on a leash except for the campground dog. His name is Chase. He's the only one that we know is. Everybody comes in and says, my dog's so well trained, it doesn't get in trash, it won't jump on, but they always do, and we can't trust you. So we have one dog that's like the campground dog. that is super, super well trained. He doesn't jump on people. He's an older dog. He doesn't get in trash. He listens to basically anybody. If somebody tells him to leave, he fucking leaves. But he's the only dog allowed off a leash. Well, the campground that's across the bridge from us, there's a bunch of people over there that's got dogs. Their dogs fucking run wild. They come and fuck with the dogs at the campground because most of the dogs are like on a chain or a leash. They try to fight with them. They get in the fucking trash. They're just horrible. So we got dog pepper spray. It doesn't hurt the dog at all. It just overwhelms its senses and makes it run away. We got bear spray that we keep there. I think we even got like those snake bite kits in the office. But yeah, we had to get dog pepper. I know it sounds cruel to pepper spray a dog, but it's not like real pepper spray. It's just like, because dogs have such a strong sense of smell, it's just like an aerosol pepper. It doesn't actually go in their eyes and do that. It just overwhelms their sense of smell and they run away. But yeah, we had to resort to dog
Incoming
pepper spray.
dono clip.
Oh shit. Yaller nuts. We might as well go ahead and play that one. That's going to be a good one, I'm sure. They always are.
He's Will, the meat hammer snake fighter. He's Will, and Bees too.
Thank you very much, Yeller Nuts. I appreciate it. Thank you for the donations. But it's been a long time. It's been 3 weeks since we got a dono clip, and you've sent 2 in the last couple of days. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Pheromones. Never heard of dog spray. The pheromones is about the bees, not the dog spray, but it overwhelms their senses. It's just a like they just breathe it and they don't like it and run away. I guess their sense of smell is like, I don't know, so many times stronger than human sense of smell. And you know, like when you're eating something spicy and it like gets up in like your sinuses and you're fucking, it makes you cough and shit. That's basically what it does.
Look at this.
Thank you, Yaller Nuts. I appreciate it.
How come the kids would rather wear the same clothes than do their own laundry?
Look at this tweet.
Teenagers in the Ricada brood, and they're not.
Look at this tweet. Imagine sucking Nick's dick so hard. Well, you want to fuck his wife too? To say, how come the kids would rather wear the same clothes than not do their own laundry? There are teenagers in the Ricada brood. They're not stepping up. I realized there was a nanny until there wasn't one. Privileged kids, do your wash. If your kids, first of all, it shouldn't be up to the kids. That shouldn't be the last line of defense. I understand giving kids chores, but if for some reason the kids don't do chores, that's the parent's job, not the kid's job. Second of all, if they don't do laundry, that's still the parent's fault, right? The parents have to teach them to do laundry, have to instill in them to take care of themselves. That's still the parent's fault. That's crazy. This is a crazy fucking post.
Not stepping up. I realized there was a nanny until there wasn't. Privileged kids, do your wash.
How about you spit on
The oldest one is a 16-year-old, but there's a 6-year-old, I think, is the youngest one.
and not the kids?
Isn't
How
this
about you?
fucked?
Or maybe and
But even if you say the 16-year-old should be doing their own laundry, you could say that, but who's supposed to teach them? Who's supposed to instill in them that they should do it? Who gives them those values where they're like, okay, I do my own laundry. If no one else does, I'll do it myself. The kids aren't supposed to fucking know that automatically.
And Ricada was the one responsible, and his wife, for raising the kids, right? Also, Mrs. Rackets didn't have a job. Also, Nick is a millionaire. How about how about the parents do their fucking job? This is not like Nick and and what's her face? Lady Rackets.
Kayla, yeah.
Had 3 jobs. They're like working 14-hour days. They're tired. They're passing out at home because they're working hard. No.
And they're sober, and then the kids, like, they're missing meals or whatever. Like, people would be more willing to understand if parents are really doing their very...
Exactly. If they were both working 2 jobs and like one time the kids missed some meals or a couple times the kids missed meals and the church, that's one thing. If it's your cocaine fueled orgies, what the fuck? Like, there's no excuse.
Best, but they're falling short, okay? Versus parents that have every privilege in the world.
There are like single parents that I feel so fucking bad for, that are doing everything they can, having to work like crazy jobs and hours, and maybe their kids miss school or they fall behind and need a tutor, or maybe they did, you know, their kids threw on some dirty clothes and went somewhere and someone noticed. Like, that's one thing. But if it's cocaine-fueled orgies, come on. Like, are we really going to blame the kids?
Every resource in the world, extended family willing to help, millions of dollars. They had a nanny. They had all this stuff, and they f***ed up, and their children are starving and stinky.
Oh, she's her? Pink Patriot's her? I'm him, so just so we know.
You know, the laundry machine is behind the crack den, so that probably solves why
Pronouns are Himothy.
the kids weren't washing their own clothes because they didn't want to have to go into the degenerate cuckold crack den where their father was fucking a woman other than their mom, and their mom was taking from Aaron Imholte. Imagine the shame of that, knowing.
I don't like cottonmouths at all. Every cottonmouth I've come upon has usually been like sitting somewhere, just chilling, or somebody stepped on it and it was just chilling. But once you got their attention, they fight a lot more than copperhead. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is the opposite. But the ones that I've interacted with, a cottonmouth will fucking fight you in a heartbeat, and usually a copperhead will fucking shoot off if they've got a place to go.
That your mom was taking Aaron Imholte's dick
in her mouth and her ass.
Wonder why. I mean, you know, we have grown adults who are depressed and who aren't taking care of themselves, not doing laundry, not brushing their teeth, you know, letting these habits fall, right? Grown adults. How about maybe the kids were fucking really depressed? You know?
That's what I'm saying.
Like, how about the kids were just traumatized, depressed?
Exactly. Like the kid's whole life was a wreck, right? They don't even have laundry. There's some other guy playing dad and feeding them. Sometimes he's gone. The only person they were safe around was their nanny. She's fucking gone. Do you think their first thought is like, well, I've got to keep the family held together by doing laundry for all my siblings?
Tired.
But they need to be held to a standard for not stepping up, and not the cokehead cuckolds that are their parents that just failed in every single responsibility of life, who chose drugs over their children. No. Let's hold the teenagers accountable in the household. Holy fuck, man.
That's what I meant too.
So
You're right. You put it up. So what I was saying was earlier, where like they were tired. That's what I meant. They were depressed. You were right. That's they were.
I didn't do laundry as a kid. Even when I was in my teenagers, my mom did it. But I often had to swap laundry because mom would like come home on a break or something, like throw laundry in. I was never trusted with laundry because I'd fuck it up. But I swapped laundry a lot, so I knew like when the dryer was done, the clothes come out, went in a basket. Mom would fold them, or somebody would fold them. Maybe even Stephanie. Stephanie might have done some of that. But I knew to swap the laundry.
They're watching their parents die and be swingers.
That's what a tourist judge or public defender is. It's a 410 pistol. It's a 410 revolver.
And do the most degenerate shit
EPS
ever.
doesn't understand is this isn't helping. Like, I don't think the sweepers understand. This isn't helping. Every single time I see this fucking shit, I get more and more pissed off. And I get more and more determined to see Rakeda face the harshest punishment possible. Like, this isn't making people go, oh, yeah, we're so sympathetic now for Rakeda. You're making the situation actively.
I mean, even if you think that, 16-year-olds should do their own laundry, who would have taught them that? Right? Who should have taught them that 16-year-olds do laundry, or 15 or 10-year-olds or 6-year-olds? Who is the person that should have taught them that? Still their parents.
Worse.
Yeah.
And he's doing this, I guess, to farm engagement.
I guess. I don't know.
He's like such a fucking psycho, man.
Well, he picks the wrong. Well, and by the way, he'll go after Eric July for using 3D assets in a video that's promoting a comic book.
That's like when kids do something stupid and get in trouble, and you're like, well, that kid should have known better. Who would have told that kid? Who taught that kid? Who should have taught that kid better? Right? It's not like kids are born with this knowledge.
For months, Ashton, fucking 6 months of Eric July. Look, the hand is.
I've been thinking about getting I think the judge has the longer barrel. I've been thinking about getting this one. I think it's called the Public Defender. Did I have that open? Let me see. History. I found one in FDE. I'm going to try to find a used one, but I found one in FDE, and I'm not FDE. Olive Drab. That I like on Buds. Let's see. Yeah, Olive Drab and Black. I like this. It's 410, 45 long Colt, but I would carry 410 in it if I'm going to be shooting snakes for sure. It's the judge, public defender. I think the judge, just the judge is like the longer barrel version. I think that'd be a good snake gun. Put it in a in-pocket holster and just carry it around. That way I don't want to be open carrying, I don't think, at the campground. Not that I couldn't, but I don't think I want to be. But I like the way that looks. I wanted a judge when they first came out. There's another one called the Circuit Judge. It's like a revolving rifle. It's pretty cool. And I looked at them when they first came out, but I just never bought one. But now I have a need for one. So, I don't know.
That good. Eric July did this. Eric July, 6 months.
He needs to be taken to task. He asked why Gilly Farms wasn't A-logging Eric July. Why aren't you guys trolling Eric July?
I don't know. I don't know why people post that like that. Like, what is this? Like, when you say my kids were doing their laundry at 16, I wanted them to learn to do it well before 18, then do one of these. No one's saying kids can't do laundry at 16. The person that should have taught them was not teaching them. They were doing cocaine and having orgies.
Supposed to troll this guy because it's his kid's fault?
A nice Judge I carry in the riverboat. Yeah, I was wondering if anybody had one and liked them.
Oh, he's acting like Marvel. He's trying to get me deplatformed from stuff. Even if it's true that Eric July is trying to get you deplatformed from stuff, which I condemn and think is really gay, it doesn't measure up to being a fucking coke fiend that neglects and doesn't feed your children. It just doesn't.
No one's saying that kids, the 16-year-olds shouldn't do laundry, or the 5-year-olds or 4. I don't care. What we're saying is no one taught them to. That you're when you do this, it's like you're arguing. Like, I guess I don't know. I guess I'm wrong. No one's saying that. No one taught these kids how to do laundry. They had a nanny. It's still the parents' fault.
Let's try and live in the real world here, Van Skyver. So that we have even more from him. Here he is versus the quartering. This is wild shit, because quartering says, like, this is a legendary sweep by Ethan Van Skyver.
Respect.
Mom and dad are on a 3-month coke bender. Why haven't the children?
Right?
Here comes
Mom and dad are on a 3-month coke bender. Why haven't the kids stepped up? Someone else came to and left comments today, and they were like, they made an absolute statement, right? They made a statement about my Trump video last night or the night before, and it was like, wasn't fair. Trump wasn't allowed to call any witnesses. And I was like, that's not true. Trump only called 2 witnesses, and the one witness that he keeps bitching about, the judge he claims that the judge banned him from calling this witness, but it just wasn't. That's not true. What happened was there was a limited scope that this witness was allowed to testify. Then his lawyers wanted to open the scope of what he was allowed to testify, which is not always allowed. And the judge said, no, you already agreed to the limited scope. But you can still call him. No one's banned from being a witness. And he called 2 witnesses. Then the other thing they said was, this crime is not a felony. It's a misdemeanor. The judge changed the law and made it a misdemeanor. And I was like, well, judges don't change laws. What actually is going on here is that falsifying business records is a misdemeanor. Unless, in the state of New York, unless it's used to conceal another crime, which would be the election fund thing, right? So if I just falsify records, business records, that's a misdemeanor. Unless I'm falsifying business records to cover up an extortion scheme, then it's a felony. And when I told him, I was like, this isn't true. Are you listening to Trump or people who repeat Trump? Or are you following Trump on Truth Social? That's these talking points. They're like, I just like to debate. I know you like to debate. I like to debate. Well, then don't say it as a statement. Don't say, the judge changed the law. Say, wasn't this supposed to be like a misdemeanor, but the judge changed the law? Or I heard that. But when you say it like an absolute statement in a comment on my video, the judge changed the law, these are all misdemeanors. That doesn't say that I like to see all points of this subject. Like, I like to listen to everybody and see what you think. I was just trying to see what you think. That you phrased that wrong then.
To let us all know, hey man, I know your only experience with children is watching them on banned Netflix documentaries.
Huh?
Like,
what does that mean?
I know your only experience with children is watching them on banned Netflix documentaries, but there are dysfunctional families all over the world where mommy and daddy aren't available to serve what you might think are basic needs. What happens in these scenarios It's that kids grow up quickly and learn to become self-sufficient. Yeah, maybe. Or they die. What is it, survival of the fittest? Getting lunch and dressing yourself isn't hard. Most children have literally no idea what their parents are up to when it comes to sex or drugs. It's the water they exist in and they're used to it. So because other kids sometimes step up and do a better job of taking care of themselves when their mom's on a Coke bender, mom and dad's on a Coke bender, these kids should, this is the dumbest argument ever.
Referring to cuties, but that isn't banned by Netflix, and the people in his camp, like Diddler, Dax, and Vito, are the ones that do defend cuties.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Quartering is against that. So
not really sure what's going on here, but he says there are dysfunctional families all over the world where mommy and daddy aren't available to serve what you might think are basic needs. So he here is saying that food...
Well, food in a clean household is basically a basic need of a kid, right? If it wasn't a basic need, then these wouldn't be grounds to take your kids away from you on, right? They're not going to take your kid because he doesn't have an iPad and all the other kids have an iPad, or you can't afford an iPhone and you get him an Android, right? And his friends make fun of him. But the things that they can take your kids over is like a clean house and being clean and feeding. So I would consider those basic needs of the kid.
And clothing are not
those are basic needs.
But it's just an invention of privileged first world people that children should have food and clothing in America in 2024 in a household where the income is well over 6 figures a year and they have access to a multi-million-dollar trust fund. Sorry, it just doesn't add up, pal.
Wait, pause. Okay, so, and by the way, Kate, on the previous line, let me just reiterate something here. If he's talking about cuties, right, and he's shitting on cuties, and saying that Quartering said it wasn't CP or whatever. Okay, EVS, let's say that's true. You hang out with Dick Masterson and Vito.
Who's like your guys?
Those guys are the cuties guys. Anyway, sorry.
I mean, it's just wild.
Anyway.
What happens in those scenarios is that kids grow up quickly and learn to become self-sufficient. I gotta ask, is it actually a good thing that kids grow up?
So they were guilty on all charges. In criminal court, you have to have a unanimous decision. In civil court, you just have to have a preponderance of evidence, and you have to have more votes yes than no.
Up quickly. Is it a good thing that their innocence
and it was
is taken
on
from
all
them?
34 counts?
That they never get to have a childhood, they never get to have a time in their life where they don't have responsibilities and they're allowed to have fun and be a kid? Isn't that really sad that they're exposed to the brutalities of life at 6 and lose their innocence in their childhood? No, it's a good thing. That'll toughen those kids up. Like
scumbags.
Who can agree with that?
I mean, that's the way I've always understood it. You have to have a unanimous verdict or you have a hung jury, right? Even if you have one person that says not guilty. Unless in civil, you just have a preponderance evidence and you have to have a majority.
Like, you know, like it is a thing. It will make them tough. It will make them callous. It'll make them so that they don't want to trust anybody ever again. It'll make them so that they have a hard time being friends with people in the future. It might make them spiral out and become addicted to drugs because they never got a period in their life where they felt like they had a childhood or that they were free from responsibility. And so they'll seek out that time period of being free from responsibility in their 20s. They might turn to drugs. They might turn to all sorts of horrible things in order to cope with that. It'll toughen them up. It'll make them hard. Like, I don't know if you realize the Industrial Revolution was not like a good time. Like the children being forced to work in the coal mines, and like it wasn't good.
Yeah, it was 100. It was unanimous. A 12-person unanimous.
Insane. You're all just privileged. Like I kind of like for children to have a little bit of privilege, especially when it's very easy for it to be provided by their millionaire parents.
Yeah.
This is wild. EVS is pulling an extra slimy maneuver, claiming the kids are too lazy to make their own lunches, but the parents aren't even covering the basics like groceries. Yeah. Does it fall on the kids to stack the pantry with their own money that doesn't exist, on top of cooking, cleaning, homework, study, round-the-clock care for the youngest? He would say yes. It's those children's responsibility. It doesn't fall on the parents. And
hey, watch this, Ash. If the cupboards and fridge was full of cereal and there was like pizza pops and all that shit, like just packed constantly, I'd be like, okay. You know, you can feed your, but even then, it does not excuse the parents being on a 6-month bender. I'm sorry. Again, it's totality. It's not just a one thing. They weren't washed. It was like everything compiled. The kids probably wanted to die. And they're like, and by the way, not only aren't they showering, they're not eating, they're also watching their parents become different, horrible people.
Yeah.
And they're like sad and they want to cry
it's
daily.
Like confusing and they can't understand why it's like this. The 16-year-old might be able to grasp why it's like that, but even so, that's not really a good thing. It's just not good.
Yeah.
And to try and spin it as like,
No, so this is a lie. This is a fucking lie. Several conservative news personalities, including some affiliated with Fox News, falsely claim that New York State Judge Juan Merchan, as one of Fox News anchors put it in a viral post on X, told the jury that they do not need unanimity to convict Trump. That's not true. Merchan instructed the jurors Wednesday that they must conclude unanimously that a defendant conspired to promote or to prevent the election of any person to a public office by unlawful means, adding that they need not be unanimous as to whether those unlawful what those unlawful means were. So they have to 100% agree that the defendant conspired to promote or prevent the election of any person to a public office by unlawful means. You don't have to unanimously agree what the unlawful means were. That's he's telling them try the crime that's there, not a crime that he's not on trial for.
Like this positive, they're going to pull themselves up by the bootstraps.
That means that the jurors have to agree unanimously that Trump committed a crime by engaging in criminal conspiracy to falsify records with the intent to commit one or more other crimes to convict him. But jurors can choose from 3 options about what the other crimes were: violations of Federal Election Campaign Act, falsification of other business records, or violation of tax laws. Those unlawful means aren't charges themselves. They're not. He's not being charged with the unlawful means. He's being charged with the upper part of it, not the lower part of it, right? So if I use some type of criminal means to get money from you, and you could say the criminal means were I lied to you, the criminal means were I falsified bank statements, the criminal means were I alluded to an agency I didn't work with. If we're not trying on those charges, we're just trying I took money from you. It doesn't matter which means you want to use. It's just that I took money from you.
This is it's madness. It really, really is. You're supposed to pull yourself up from your bootstraps by the time you're 3 years old. And then
the jury instruction was complex and nuanced to get directly to the point, and some right-wing accounts ran with false reports. In response to inaccurate reporting that Trump could be convicted without unanimous agreement that he committed a crime, a user on Gab, a site popular with right-wing proponents, said Wednesday, "It is time to find out where that judge lives and protest, as the left calls it." Another user posted, "I hear bad stuff happens to judges in their driveways," on Telegram. A user called for a military tribunal for Merchan, and on the official Telegram channel of Steve Bannon's War Room, a user said Merchan and all involved should be hanged. Oh, over on another pro-Trump forum, a user said Merchan wants to be the merchant of death to sell more rope, except he could easily be selling the rope that hangs him. Another user added, treason with the full penalty, death. On X, a right-wing influencer asked followers who among them wanted to see Merchan locked up for treason. Another user who identified himself as a Marine replied, "Let me handle the justice system and be judge and prosecutor. Immediate trial and justifiable punishments handed out. Funeral directors, get ready for a lot of Democrat socialist elites coming your way." That's a cool threat to make. Trump continued making social media posts about the jury instructions Thursday morning, quoting a Fox News commentator who called the prosecution an Alice in Wonderland case with a Mad Hatter judge, in which the cherished principles of fairness had been turned upside down. Time and time again, legal proceedings in the four cases against Trump have resulted in violent threats, and at least one case, actual violence. In August, Trump supporters posted the names and addresses of grand jurors in Fulton County, Georgia, who indicted Trump and 18 co-defendants. In August 2022, a Jan 6 right participant named Ricky Walter Schiffer posted calls for violence after the FBI searched Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida, and then fired a nail gun into an FBI field office in Cincinnati before he was killed by law enforcement. More recently, Trump and his congressional allies falsely said that President Joe Biden plotted to kill Trump in the search of Mar-a-Lago based upon a disclosure of standard FBI use of force forms that limits the use of deadly force and must be filled out for every operation. That's what I said. In fact, federal authorities specifically planned the search from a time when Trump was known to be out of the state and contacted the Secret Service ahead of time to make sure the plan went as smoothly as possible. Even right-wing former FBI special agents who have called for the Bureau to be abolished pushed back against the false narrative, calling the FBI use of force language just boilerplate and showing frustration that viral misinformation on the right had forced them to be in the position of looking like they were defending the Bureau. Attorney General Merrick Garland last week called for the lies about the use of force policy false and extremely dangerous and pointed out that the same standard operations plan was used in the search of Biden's own home, yet didn't lead to conspiracy theories that Biden planned to have himself assassinated. I don't know. They just run with shit.
People wonder why, like, conservatives are lambasted for being heartless scumbags. Like, parents aren't supposed to provide for their kids. This is the argument he's making.
Well, you said, I mean, an NBC producer followed the Rittenhouse jurors' bus every morning taking pictures of it. What the fuck does that have to do with jury instructions? I was reading the rest of the fucking article. The jury instructions, you don't have to agree on what the underlying crime, if you're going for the crime that was, they're not on trial for the underlying crime. You don't have to agree on that. Did he use, did he falsify tax records to do this for a politician himself? Did he use election funds, campaign funds inappropriately? Did he hide that from him, falsify business records? Those don't matter as long as the last tenet is met.
He goes, getting lunch and dressing yourself isn't hard. Well, it is when you have no money to get lunch, isn't it? Mm-hmm. You know, like, this is what...
I'm sorry, your simple mind can't understand it. The rest of us can.
Most children have literally no idea what their parents are up to when it comes to sex or drugs. It's the water they exist in and they're used to it. Does that make it...
If I was charged for negligent manslaughter, and let's say I was speeding, I was doing drugs, and I was texting in a car, and I killed somebody, I was charged for negligent manslaughter. You don't have to agree whether it was the drugs or the speeding or the texting on my phone. You don't have to agree on that if you're going for just negligent manslaughter. You can say, I think he's guilty of negligent manslaughter because he was drunk. You can say, I think he was guilty of negligent manslaughter because he was on drugs. You can say, I think he was guilty of negligent manslaughter because he's speeding. I think he was guilty of negligent manslaughter because he was texting on his phone. But you don't have to agree on those to still get me for negligent manslaughter.
Okay.
What the f***?
Does that make it good? So it's like the children of heroin addicts. They just grow up in that.
They're used to it.
They're used to it. The children of child...
Because he was guilty. Because he was guilty. Yes, it is. It's the exact same fucking thing. You don't have to agree on the underlying crime to convict of the over-the-top crime that was committed. That's the exact same thing. Exactly. That was the best fucking analogy that any of us could come up with. I guarantee it.
Molesters who are molested by their parents, they grew up in it. They're used to it. What's the problem? It's the water they live in. They don't see why it's wrong. Do you see how you're...
It was only corrupt when it went after Trump, right?
You're a fucking insane, Van Sciver? How they wouldn't apply to any other fucking situation? Ever? This is insane, dude.
Never agreed with another case
ever
that
you want in the
that
world
went to a jury.
He says, this isn't to excuse Nick or Kayla. Oh, really? Oh, really? Oh, really?
Getting lunch, you dress yourself isn't hard. Most children have no idea what their parents are up to when it comes to sex or drugs. It's the water they exist in. They're used to it. This isn't to excuse Nick or Kayla. Feel free to be angry with them and want them in prison for life. But as a kid who grew up in a similar household with 8 brothers and sisters, we learned to take care of ourselves. But you shouldn't have to, right? You shouldn't have to.
Then why say it? Then why fucking say it?
There's no reason.
Oh, don't tell him, Ironside.
World just needs to be corrected. That children need to...
Those instructions have been given out in other cases. When there's underlying matters and when there's like 10 or 15 things, let's say there's 5 things that could make you guilty of this. You don't have to agree. Like, I think he did 1 and 3. And another person says, I think he did 2 and 4. That make him guilty of the overwhelming crime. You don't have to agree. You don't have to get to like, oh, we all got to agree he did 1 and 3. You don't have to do that. Those are simple instructions.
Defend for themselves and their parents don't need to help them? You crazy.
Like children should have responsibility.
You know that this line is a lie. When he says this isn't to excuse Nick or Kayla, but his next line is this sarcastic bullshit. Feel free to be angry with them and want them in prison for life. I don't know if anybody is actually asking for them to be in prison for life.
No one's...
Exactly. If you came from that household, you shouldn't be dismissing... you should be missing adults that are doing the same thing. Like, Mariah all the time would be like, I can't watch this video because it like reminds me of my dad. But she's not saying, I grew up like this and I'm just fine. That's shitty. Maybe they will be fine. No one's saying there isn't, but that doesn't excuse anything that these people did.
Straw man.
And it's like trying to make it out to be like, oh, if you're angry with them, you're a fucking unhinged lunatic. No, you're the unhinged fucking lunatic. Like,
I've got the jury instructions
as a kid
here.
who grew up in a similar household with 8 brothers or sisters, we learned to take care of ourselves. My argument is you shouldn't have had to. It's seriously like some.
It's technically 55 pages, but I don't know that I would call it 50. I mean, some of the pages look like this. Just scrolling through it, some of the pages look like this. that's page 5. Like, it's technically 55 pages. It's pretty big font, typeface. It is. Some of the pages have one fucking paragraph on them. So I don't know that the 55 pages is a good argument. Would it be better if it was 30 pages and there wasn't the gigantic spaces? I don't know.
Apparently his parents were rich.
Back in my day.
Apparently,
were they?
Yeah. Well, chat. Am I wrong? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But someone in chat was saying that. So.
But it's just this cycle of
read the instructions in a minute if you want to.
And he turned out okay, even though he didn't. He's like a fucked up, insane monster. Well, judging by these statements, that it should have to happen to other people, or that other people should have to overcome it. Like, this is insane.
Okay, but Ash, okay, you lived, with 8 brothers and sisters. Okay, were your parents out of their
It's the water they live in. They get used to it.
mind doing orgies and not buying food?
I don't even know that these kids had time to get used to it. It's not like they grew up to a crackhead mom and dad and they've lived with a crackhead mom and dad their whole life. It looks like Nick's really went downhill in the last year or two on cocaine. And they had a nanny before that. Nanny disappears. Yeah, I don't know that they even had time to get used to it.
Because that would make it a bit tougher, or were they? Okay.
All right, so here we have him going off. He's not just leaving it to tweets. He's doing it on his show as well.
Yeah.
Some kids grow up poor, and the only meal they get is going to school and getting a free lunch. Is that the way every kid should grow up? Is that what we should strive for? Should that be the goal?
I grew up having to become self-reliant, having to make plans, having to, cope with life, as it were, being unkind to me, being unfair, and finding a way to be self-reliant. I didn't become a welfare kid. I wasn't like, I was never,
Buddy, pause. When he says shit like he didn't become a welfare kid, is he not aware that his entire life is crowdfunded?
I don't think there should be any shame in being a welfare kid. Just like, I think it's weird that Scott McKay talks about how his body was broken, he was disabled, never took a dime of disability. That's what it's there for. It's a safety net. And especially if you're a kid. If you're a fucking kid, like, who cares if your parents might care. You might look down on the parents, I guess, but the kid, because their family gets food stamps or welfare.
That's so true, bud.
How are you self-sufficient when you can't even fund your own comic book projects, let alone deliver on them? This is like, it's similar to when Sean Hannity claimed that he had been working in self-sufficient since he was 5 years old. I'm pretty sure Sean actually claimed that he'd been pulling himself up by his bootstraps since he was 5. And it's just like, this is fucking delusional nonsense. These fucking kids, these welfare cases, they expected their parents to take care of them when they were 6 years old. Whoa, man. Like, I guess we ought to send the fucking 6-year-old girl down into the coal mines to provide for herself.
You're so right, though, bro. You're so fucking right about the raising money thing. It's like stop acting like you're above it. Don't act like you're above it. Shut the up. You know what I mean?
Took a handout. I never did anything like that.
The handout.
I was never a 6-year-old asking for a handout.
Out wide. Like, every night when you stream, and we're guilty of hands out.
If a kid is hungry, I want them to come for a handout. I want them to tell me, like, hey, I'm hungry. We don't have food. Hey, can I have some food? I'm hungry. Like, I want a kid to come for a handout. What the fuck is wrong with these people?
Like, where's my super chat? Where's my money?
Help us,
I can't
please.
make my own comic book. I need help to defeat the woke left. Give me money. Give me money. Buy this, buy that. Like, you're not like this self-made incredible person that was blessed better than everybody else. Like, it's just bullshit.
Well, we've always been honest. We understand this show, folks, has existed for almost 3 years because of the viewers, and we appreciate it. But this guy acts like he...
All of these are crowdfunded, basically, right? Especially if you can't get monetized, like their show, like my show. Like, they're all crowd. This show, we say it all the time, this show is funded by viewers. It's funded by you guys. I couldn't do it and lose money all the time.
He fucking shut the up, EVS. He's such a fucking bitch. He's such a bitch.
I got a job when I was 15.
Okay, congrats. I had one
buddy.
at 15.
Yeah.
Earlier.
chicken, and I worked all through high school. The minute I could work, I started taking care of myself.
Bro, I worked so much as a kid. So much.
And then when I started making real money,
I worked a bunch when I was a kid, and there's a bunch of stuff that I missed out on. I mean, I'm sure I learned work ethic and hard work and made money, but there's a bunch of stuff that I missed out on that I probably would have enjoyed going to.
17, 18.
Uh-huh.
Started making real money at
and
17,
then going to work for Harris Comics.
Okay, but how can the kids go get a job or do anything in life when there's no food in the house and their parents are crackheads? You know what? I bet you now the kids will be able to pull some shit together.
Why are we even having this discussion?
Nick did the same thing. Nick blamed the kids when he was tweeting like, you know, I get up every morning, I have dance and school and sports, and he blamed the kids for his drug use.
Oh, you're right. It's like
It's just insane. This whole thing is a deflection. So that instead of focusing on condemning Rekieta, the focus is then on the kids. So they get to go on the attack instead of being on the defense and force everybody to justify the children's behavior. It's such a scummy fucking tactic from these guys.
Amazing
and they
point.
just think it's all going to be okay because they're outrage and engagement farming, but they're really fucking with something that people take very seriously. Like people take children's welfare more seriously than I think anything else. Like out of anything out there, like children being neglected or sexually abused or physically abused, like, you know, it's up there. That and animals being abused because they're helpless, because they're people that are not considered, they're entities that are not considered by society to be able to take care of themselves yet.
He's kind of
so he's f***ing with people that are going to get really, really mad. And like, you're not going to like the results of this. You're really not going to like what's going to happen. I'm just telling you now.
No, but you know what's
it's all
worse,
fun
Ash?
and games to be a contrarian asshole, I'm sure.
No, I'll tell you what's worse, Ash. It's that goddamn pesky Eric July.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
It's Eric
Like-
July.
Shut the fuck up.
I started paying the bills around the house with that money. So, you know, listen.
But should you have
Made
to
you
have?
pay the bills?
I don't understand how this is like a good thing for this to have happened. I just don't agree.
This stuff
I don't believe it, by the way. I don't believe it.
actually is probably, I know this sounds hard to believe to some of you pussies. This is
You're just a pussy.
This is crazy.
It's going to be good for the 6-year-old to
hard
have
to
the
believe
cops
to some of you
break
pussies.
down the fucking door. It's good for the 6-year-old to see her parents led away in fucking handcuffs after the cops broke down the fucking door and she's begging for a change of clothes. Yeah, that's a really good situation to put her.
That's rough.
That falls on
That's a
the
rough
pastor,
take
right?
from this
Rekieta
dude.
at no point has any responsibility for anything. It's either the pastor's fault, the kid's fault, the church people's fault, but it's never Precious Rekieta's fault, never Precious Kayla's fault, neither is it Aaron or April's fault, only so much as that can be used to sweep it up for Nick and Kayla.
No, and by the way, this is, you pussies, it's fucking good for the kids to see their parents turn into complete crackheads. Did you see how Nick was acting by the end, guys?
Teaches you resilience.
kids have-
It'll teach them not to do drugs, right? Wouldn't you want your dad to be a raging alcoholic who beats on you and your mom so you know that your genetics probably don't let you handle alcohol well?
See, yeah, no, how about this? It's not good to watch your parents turn into crackhead. Is
Well,
that
Nick should,
insane?
yeah, I mean, delusionary PhD in chat's right. Nick should use it as a legal argument. Why couldn't my fucking children feed themselves? Your Honor, where is their responsibility in this? And like, I just love how Rekieta endorses this, by the way. He endorses this. He loves this. He hasn't come out and said, can you leave my kids out of it and stop
Wrong again. What the unlawful means were to commit the crime. Again, you're just wrong. You do not understand. I don't know how fucking dumb you are, but this crime happened. It could have happened because of 5 different things. You do not have to agree on which of the 5 things caused it to happen, but you have to agree on, did this crime happen? You're just fucking wrong.
scapegoating them, Ethan Van Sciver? Fucking good logic. Can you guys stop scapegoating my children so that I can avoid responsibility?
He likes all our tweets.
He likes all of their tweets. And he's out there in the private pushing this narrative, saying we should go after my kids. Guaranteed that's what he's doing right now. But you still want to defend him? Really?
Lock him up.
This is actually going to be good for the kids, okay? In a way, it is. They're going to grow up.
All they know is, my favorite person who supports Trump told me this, so I'm going to repeat it. You can't read. You can't fucking comprehend. You don't understand. I'm sorry you don't, but you're bad at this. Very fucking bad. I gave the best possible example. If they're not charging me with DUI, they're not charging me with speeding, and they're not charging me with texting on the phone. They're charging me with vehicular negligent manslaughter. You don't have to agree what caused the crash. Just like you don't have to agree what caused him to violate this law. It could have been taxes. It could have been campaign funds. It could have been It could have been falsifying the records, but he committed this crime. If you think he did A and committed crime X, cool. If you think he did A and B or just B, cool. If you think he did A, B, and C or just C or B and C, that's cool. As long as you unanimously agree he broke crime X.
To be
or law
stronger,
X,
more
committed
self-reliant,
crime X.
as long as they can,
It's called, you give your kids chores.
Yeah, that's what I was arguing with somebody on YouTube comments today. They just, whatever Trump says, they just repeat it again. Whatever Trump says, they just repeat it again. Someone told me today in my comments, Trump was not allowed to call any witnesses because that's what Trump said. Trump said he wasn't allowed. First time ever, case this big, never been done before. I can't even call witnesses. Trump's team only called 2 witnesses. And the third witness they wanted to call, the judge says, fine, you could call him. But we all agreed pre-trial, he's only allowed to talk about X, Y, and Z. He's not allowed to talk about A, B, and C. You agreed to that, so I'm going to hold you to it. Then they got mad and didn't call him at all. Like, he's just lying and they're repeating it.
And learn, skills, right? You don't do fucking drugs and have orgies and become the... Oh, my... I feel like I'm crazy town. I'm in crazy town right now.
This case right here that we're looking at, Nick, if we're just doing child neglect, you don't have to agree that cocaine is what made them neglect them. You don't have to agree that not cleaning them or feeding them was what caused the neglect. You just have to agree that there was neglect.
It really is crazy town. It's planet retard.
In a way, they'll be a lot better.
You don't. This person doesn't understand what. You don't need to be unanimous as to what those unlawful means were. Right? They don't understand what that statement means. In other words, you drug analogy is wrong because the jury would need to agree on why the crash happened, not that it happened because he was drunk. No, they would need to know that I broke the law, not what contributing factor made me break the law.
No, how about you give your kids responsibilities around the house and go, listen, if you don't take out the garbage, you won't watch TV or play fucking games. If you don't fucking do so-and-so, if you don't brush your teeth, you're not going to do, it's called, like, chores, folks.
I mean, this is
the word exists.
This is like textbook, like what an abuser says.
Yeah.
I know I was tough on you, boy, but it made you tough.
We'll read them in a second because people are so goddamn retarded.
With the bell, but that not make you tough, boy? When I whooped your ass when I was drunk, boy? It's like, whoa, like this isn't necessary. This is dumb. This is insane shit. This is the justification that abusers use for their abuse. It's not okay. It's oh, you're just being a Karen. Da, da, da. Okay, I forgot we can't care about anything.
I wonder where they all got slot machines for their backgrounds.
The only thing we can care about is defending Nick Rekieta to the death. What's most important is making sure that this scumbag piece of shit still has a huge audience of people to grab.
My dad, I guess he's a dad and gone now, so statute of limitation. My dad used to run, with a buddy of his, used to run a pretty illegal casino. Gambling is illegal in Tennessee still, but they had a bunch of slot machines at one time. This place I used to hang out when I was a teenager, it was a pool hall. But if you went to the back part of it and knew they literally had a passphrase. If you knew the passphrase, they would let you in this door that was like, there was a guy sitting there at the bathroom, like before you go into the bathrooms on a stool all the time. And he was the owner's brother, I think. And if you just went to the bathrooms, you just went to the bathrooms. There's another door at the end of the hall that looked like it would be like storage closet for like toilet paper and shit. But if you knew the passcode, he would, I don't know if he like knocked or what, he did something. And then they would unlock that back door that looked like the supply closet. There's a bunch of slot machines and shit back there. They had a craps table that would be running sometimes just like on big weekends. It wasn't running all the time. Most of the time it's sitting there empty. But there's a bunch of shit back there.
Off of, and he can tell us all how he's a traditional dad and he's a king, dad of the year, father of 5, homeschooling them, looking down his nose at people who do send their kids to public school. Yeah, let's go back to the status quo. Let's go back to the norm. Let's not ask for this guy to make any sort of change in his life or take any sort of responsibility. He should drink up. He should continue the same way. It's the kids who need to change. It's the kids who should go to work to buy daddy's liquor. Why should daddy have to live stream? Really? The children.
That's not true. That's not true. If he committed this crime, it's a misdemeanor. Unless it was in coordination with any other crime in the world. It doesn't matter what any other crime in the world. The New York state law says that falsifying these records is a misdemeanor unless it is used to cover up another crime. What might that crime be? Any of them. Any other fucking crime. Any crime in the world. If he falsified records to hide that he littered, it's a felony. If he falsified records to buy a gun outside of the legal way to buy a gun, it's a felony. If he falsified records to cover up that he was speeding, it's a felony. It doesn't matter.
Should work to buy daddy's booze. The children should work to buy his Coke. And if they have a problem with that, well, why shouldn't he be allowed to put his hands on his kids and teach him? Because that'll make him tough. Like, where does the line end on if you abuse your child, it makes them stronger? Like, where does it stop? At what point do you draw that line? Are you allowed to just take your belt off and whoop them? Well, okay, I guess so. Are you allowed? Like, where is the line? And that's what I'd like to know. Where do you draw the line on that? I guess never.
The kids will be stronger for it, guys.
Let's just
I waterboard my children.
Leave the house, right?
That way, they'll be strong if the CIA ever moves in on them.
Kids alone, and then they'll learn how to live alone. So when they move out, they have the tools.
I go ahead and shoot my kid's dog in front of them in case ATF agents ever show up.
They'll be experienced at being.
They'll be ready. It's the water they live in,
Leave
guys.
a 10-year-old alone, right? For a week. And then they'll be forced to be self-reliant, right, Ash?
I know. All right, let's finish this off, and then we'll go to the pig versus Stardust.
We got to keep
Jesus
our own clothes are clean. We got to, we got to feed ourselves.
If the fucking washing machine maybe wasn't in the crack den.
Sounds terrible. It's going to be better for them. It was better for
His channel is Karmic Artist Pro Secrets. I guess he works for like a comic company.
us in a way. It built stronger Americans. Okay.
Americans.
So we have
you're
to
so
tie this in-
patriotic.
yeah, we have to tie it into patriotism and nationalism and political ideology. If you're a
Conservatism.
real American, you do neglect your kid because it makes them tough, not like those fucking snowflakes who feed their kids. Checkmate, lib. You feed your child.
Snowflakes feed their
What's wrong
kids.
with you? Don't you know they'll grow up to let other men their wives? Oh wait, Lord Baldo was doing the very same. All that talk about Jack Murphy this and that, cock this, cock that, degen this, degen that, and he's watching from around the door. Well,
It is weird. It is very weird that they're very hung up on this. They're degenerates. They do this. They do that. They're cucks. They, all this shit. That's like their mantra. They go after everybody for being degenerates, being cucks and shit. Then they watch Nick like dive headfirst into degeneracy, right? Drugs and cheating and fucking sex and swinging and getting shit-faced drunk and falling asleep on stream and jacking himself off. And they're like, oh no, he's based.
Aaron plows his wife because he can't get his card. Really?
God.
Like, this is insanity.
Good clip from the Keno Casino. I found that tweet, but I didn't know they covered it. All right, here you go. Post-summation instructions. Members of the jury, I will now instruct you on the law. I will first review the general principles of the law that apply to this case and all criminal cases. So they apply to this case and all other criminal cases. You have heard me explain some of those principles at the beginning of the trial. I'm sure you can appreciate the benefits of repeating those instructions at this stage of the proceedings. Next, I will define the crimes. This always happens. Jury instructions always define the crimes and the tenets they have to meet. In this case, crimes charged in this case, explain the law that applies to those definitions and spell out the elements for each charged crime. Finally, I will outline the process of jury deliberations. These instructions will take at least an hour, and you will not receive copies of them. You may, however, request that I read them back to you in whole or in part as many times as you wish, and I will be happy to do so. Role of the court and jury. During these instructions, I will not summarize the evidence. If necessary, I may refer to portions of the evidence to explain the law that relates to it. My reference to evidence or my decision not to refer to evidence expresses no opinion about the truthfulness, accuracy, or importance. So if I go over evidence, I'm not condoning it. I'm not saying that this evidence proves that. I'm just saying this is the evidence, this is the law, as impartially as possible. In fact, nothing I have said in the court of this trial was meant to suggest that I have any opinion about this case. If you have formed an impression that I do have an opinion, you must put it out of your mind and disregard it. These are regular boilerplate. The level of my voice or intonation may vary during these instructions. If I do that, it is done to help you understand. It is not done to communicate any opinion about the law or the facts or the case or whether the defendant is guilty or not guilty. It is my responsibility to judge the evidence here. It is yours. It is not my responsibility to judge the evidence here. It is yours. You are the judges of the facts, and you are responsible for deciding whether the defendant is guilty or not guilty. I'll pull it over here so we're not just looking at a blank screen, I guess. Remember, you have promised to be a fair juror. A fair juror is a person who will keep the promise to be fair and impartial and who will not permit the verdict to be influenced by bias or prejudice in favor of or against a person who appeared in this trial on account of that person's race, color, national origin, ancestry, gender identity or expression, religion, religious practice, age, disability, or sexual orientation. And further, a fair juror must be mindful of any stereotypes or attitudes about people or about groups of people that the juror may have, and must not allow those stereotypes or attitudes to affect the verdict. Again, this is standard. You can't be biased in any way. And this is probably more important in the Trump case than any other. I mean, people feel very strongly about Trump, either pro-Trump or anti-Trump. As I've explained, we all develop and hold unconscious views on many subjects. Some of those unconscious views may come from stereotypes and attitudes about people or groups of people that may impact on a person's thinking and decision-making without that person even knowing it. As a juror, you are asked to make a very important decision about another member of the community. I know you would not want to make that decision based on such stereotypes or attitudes. That is, on what we call implicit biases. And it would be wrong for you to do so. A fair juror must guard against the impact of such stereotypes or attitudes. You can do this by asking yourself during your deliberations whether your views or conclusions would be different if the defendant, witnesses, or other that you have heard about or seen in court were of a different race, color, national origin, ancestry, gender identity, or expressive religious practice, age, or sexual orientation. So, would I convict the same person if they were black? Would I believe this witness if they were white? Whatever. If the answer is yes, then in keeping with your promise to be fair, reconsider your views and conclusions along with other jurors and make sure your verdict is based on the evidence and not the stereotypes or attitudes. Justice requires no less. Limiting instructions regarding the defendant. You're not going to let, you can't understand it, so you're not going to let it. You can't understand it. We're going to read it all because you're the fucking person who can't understand it, not me. Jurors, you will recall that during the jury selection, you agreed that you would set aside any personal opinions or bias you might have in favor or against the defendant, and that you would decide this case fairly on the evidence and law. Again, I direct you to decide this case on the evidence and the law as it relates to the defendant here on trial. You must set aside any personal opinions or bias you might have in favor of or against the defendant, and you must allow any such opinions to influence your verdict. So this has got to be a huge question during jury selection. This has got to be a huge question. Like, do you have bias against Trump? Because so many people do. There's so many people that do. And yet here you are. Have fun reading it to nobody, as I said in your chat. Gotcha. Remember also, in your deliberations, you may not consider or speculate about matters relating to sentence or punishment. This is another big thing. A lot of times jurors will think about, well, if I convict him, we'll get this. Or if I do this, we'll get that. We can talk about that too. People say that the daughter is being paid because Trump said it, and that's all they know is repeat what Trump says. Or someone who likes Trump that you also like. That the daughter was receiving money from Biden or Kamala. The daughter works for a digital marketing company that works with campaigns. She doesn't get paid by Biden or Kamala Harris or a Democrat. She gets paid by her fucking boss. And they get paid by their clients. The daughter's job is irrelevant to the judge. Are you that fucking dumb? Or do you inspect every judge's kids, every judge's aunt, every judge's... That's so fucking stupid. Even Trump's own lawyers said, before the case started, said that they liked the judge Marchand, that he didn't have any biases, that they didn't think that there would be any issue with him being the judge until they lose. And then they're like, Trump, his daughter works for Biden, basically. You may not now consider or speculate about the matters relating to sentence. A lot of people will say, like, if I convict him, he might get life in prison. He might get this. He might get that. It doesn't matter. She works for her boss. Do you think she picks the clients? You're so fucking dumb. No, you're just mad because I'm fair. And fair right now is with the jury. We gave it a jury. If there is a verdict of guilty, it will be my responsibility to impose an appropriate sentence. So you can't be worried about whether they get life in prison, whether they get a death sentence. Just, are they guilty, are they innocent? When you judge the facts, you are to consider only the evidence. The evidence in this case includes the testimony of witness, the exhibits that were received in evidence, and the stipulations agreed to by the parties. Remember, a stipulation is information the parties have agreed to present to the jury as evidence without calling a witness to testify. Testimony, which is stricken from the record or to which an objection was sustained, must be disregarded by you. This is what I think is hard. This is the jury's instructions from the judge. This is what I think would be hard is if there's an objection, it's supposed to be how do you forget something, right? How do you make sure that you're not biased to not take something into consideration? Exhibits that were just seen during the trial are marked for identification but not received in evidence are not evidence and thus are not available for your inspection and consideration. But testimony based on those exhibits that were not received in evidence may be considered by you. It is just that the exhibit itself is not available for your inspection and consideration. Evidentiary inferences. In evaluating the evidence, you may consider any fact that is proven and any inference which may be drawn from such fact. To draw an inference means to infer, find, conclude that a fact exists or does not exist based upon proof of some other fact or facts. For example, suppose you go to bed one night when it is not raining and you wake up in the morning, you look out your window, you do not see rain, but you see the streets and sidewalks are wet and people that are wearing raincoats and people are wearing raincoats and carrying umbrellas. Under those circumstances, it may be reasonable to infer, that is, conclude, that it rained during the night. In other words, the fact of it having rained while you were asleep is an inference that might be drawn from the proven facts of the presence of water on the streets and sidewalks and people in raincoats and carrying umbrellas. So if the jury doesn't remember something and they go back and look, okay. Well, I mean, I guess with a long trial, that because I would forget it for sure. Like I would be the guy that wants like a fucking copy of everything and asks 1,000 questions, guaranteed. I would have to. An inference must only be drawn from a proven fact or facts, and then only if the inference flows naturally, reasonably, and logically from the proven facts or facts, not if it is speculative. So you can only infer based the evidence leading that way, right? You can't speculate about what was going on or what didn't go on or what should have happened or didn't happen. Therefore, in deciding whether to draw an inference, you must look at and consider all the facts in light of reason, common sense, and experience. As you know, certain exhibits were admitted into evidence with some portions blacked out or redacted. Those redactions were made to remove personal identifying information and to ensure that only relevant admissible evidence was put before you. You may not speculate as to what material was redacted or why. So you can't say, well, they took this out, obviously, because it's incriminating. Those have already been decided, right? Now he's going to have to watch in silence. Oh, no. You can't speculate about why they did that. And you may not draw any inference, favorable or unfavorable, against either party from the fact that certain material has been redacted. So you can't use redacted information to refer either for or against Trump. I'm sure it was hard to find an unbiased jury. Usually what happens is it's really hard to find an unbiased jury, especially if your crime is something like hit the news or something to do with kids or single mom. I mean, there's a lot of people that like I like most people get freaked out when there's like a crime against the kids, right? Or a crime against this or crime against that. People have bias already, or something happened to you in life. Maybe you were in a hit and run and now the trial's about a hit and run. It's hard to separate that. So each lawyer can dismiss jurors for prejudice and then they just have to go with the best they got. But and that's why in a criminal case it only takes one, right? You may say, oh, the odds are stacked against me and I only got 2 jurors that I think actually even like Trump or that are Trump fans or voted for Trump. Well, it only takes one. That's it. Wait, you're not even here. Remember, nobody's watching. Nobody's watching. Read it to nobody. Where you at? Where you at, Blazers? You fucking retard. As you know, certain exhibits were admitted into evidence, of course, blacked out. You can't redact it or why, favorable or unfavorable against either party from the fact that certain material has been redacted. Limiting instructions. You're not even here. You may recall that I instructed you several times during the trial that certain exhibits were being accepted in evidence for a limited purpose. So again, limited evidence, limited evidence, limited scope of questioning. That was one of the issues with the witnesses. That's why someone's like, they wouldn't let Trump call any witnesses. Oh no. Oh no. Already posted to your Twitter and here. Go vote for Biden. You gotta go vote for Biden. Fucking retarded motherfuckers. I can't understand it for you. This is your, like, they're so dumb. We're literally reading about biases and they're biased, right? Well, Trump said and Fox News said they don't have to be unanimous to convict. Yes, they did. And would it matter that they don't have to, if you claim the judge told them they don't have to be unanimous and they were all unanimous on 34 charges? If I told the jury only one person has to say guilty for it to count and still all fucking 12 voted guilty on everything, would it matter? If they were going to have a hung jury, they would have had a hung jury either way. You may recall that I instructed several times in the trial that certain exhibits were being accepted into evidence for a limited purpose only, and that you were not to consider that evidence for any other purposes. Under the law, we refer to that as a limiting instruction. I will now remind you of some of the limiting instructions. So these are things that he limited from the get-go. Listen to this comment. That's right. Ban me, F slur. I'm on Twitch. Enjoy the PTSD. That's the role model that you should believe about the Trump case. Enjoy your PTSD. You got me there. I've got PTSD from combat. You got me. You showed me. You got me. The links they shared were from the National Review. It's hard-hitting news there. Anyways, so these are the limited instructions that were given. He's just reminding them. He's already addressed this with them. Now he's reminding them. So on AMI, this is the company that owned Inquirer magazine, all the tabloids, right? You will recall that you heard testimony that while David Pecker was an executive at AMI, AMI entered into a non-disclosure agreement with federal prosecutors, as well as conciliation agreement with the Federal Election Commission, the FEC. I remind you that evidence was permitted to assist you, the jury, in assessing David Pecker's credibility and to help you provide context for some of the surrounding events. You may consider that testimony for those purposes only. Neither the non-prosecution agreement nor the conciliation agreement is evidence of the defendant's guilt. So just because he agreed to work with the FEC and had a non-prosecution agreement doesn't mean Trump's guilty. We're just saying he obviously had some type of credibility here because they went with him. And you may not consider them in determining whether the defendant is guilty or not guilty on the charged crimes. Michael Cohen. You also heard testimony that the Federal Election Commission conducted an investigation into the payment to Stormy Daniels and of responses submitted by Michael Cohen and his attorney to the investigation. That evidence was permitted to assist you, the jury, in assessing Michael Cohen's credibility and to help you provide context for some of the surrounding events. You may consider that evidence for those purposes only. Likewise, you will recall that you heard testimony that Michael Cohen pleaded guilty to violating the Federal Election Campaign Act, otherwise known as FECA, F-E-C-A. I remind you that evidence was permitted to assist you, the jury, in assessing Mr. Cohen's credibility as a witness and to help provide context for some of the events that followed. You may consider that testimony for those purposes only. Neither the fact that the FEC investigation, Mr. Cohen and his attorney's responses, or the fact that Mr. Cohen pleaded guilty constitutes evidence of the defendant's guilt. So you can't say, well, if Michael Cohen's guilty, that means Trump's guilty. These are two separate cases. You're not even allowed to consider that in your head. You shouldn't be. So sometimes there's bias you can't get rid of. Like you can't forget that Michael Cohen pleaded guilty and he worked for Trump. But you've got to weigh that. You got to say in your head, I guess, I wouldn't be good at this because I overanalyze everything. But in your head, you got to think that Am I just deciding this because I'm thinking about Michael Cohen? You may not consider them in determining whether the defendant is guilty or not guilty of the charged crimes. Wall Street Journal news article. You'll recall that certain Wall Street Journal news articles were accepted into evidence during the trial. I remind you now that the articles were accepted and may be considered by you for limited purpose of demonstrating that the articles were published on or about a certain date and to provide context for other evidence. The exhibits may not be considered by you as evidence that any of the assertions in the articles are true. So you have to even take news articles with a grain of salt. We know they were published this day and they provide context to any other evidence that might exist, but they're not the judge and the jury, right? They don't get to decide. Other hearsay evidence not accepted for its truth. There were other exhibits which contained hearsay and were not accepted for the truth of the matter asserted, but for another purpose. For example, there were several National Enquirer headlines and an invoice from Investor Advisory Services. Those were accepted for a limited purpose of demonstrating that the articles were published and the document created. There were also some text messages that were accepted with a similar limitation. For example, in 171.A, with respect to Gina Rodriguez text only, and 257 with respect to Chris Cuomo's text only, the text messages were accepted for limited purpose of providing context for the responses by Dylan Howard and Michael Cohen. So just for the responses, they don't make anybody guilty. These exhibits, which were accepted into evidence with the limiting instruction, are 152, 153A, 153B, 153C, 161, 171A, 180, 181, and 257. So again, this is just, you get briefed on different evidence. This is a very complex case of and it's been basically in the public for a long time. There's no way that they were sequestered enough to not hear about all this stuff going on. If you have any additional questions or need clarification as to which exhibits were accepted into evidence with limitations, just send me a note with your question. I will be happy to clarify. I feel like the judge probably did a really good job of dumbing this down to where anybody could understand it on the jury, right? He could have used legal jargon and he could have referenced things within the case that they wouldn't even fucking understand. I think he did a really good job of dumbing this down. But even not dumb enough for John Doe on Twitter. Enjoy your PTSD. Sounds like you got PTSD from some other man's a millionaire fucking a porn star, and you've got PTSD because he's innocent. We now turn to the fundamental principles of law that apply in all criminal trials: the presumption of innocence, the burden of proof, and the requirement of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Throughout these proceedings, the defendant is presumed to be innocent. As a result, you must find the defendant not guilty unless, on the evidence presented at this trial and only this trial, you conclude that the people have proven the defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. This is with every criminal trial. We presume innocent, and you have to say not guilty unless they've done their jobs and proved it. In determining there's probably been cases, I guarantee you there's been jurors that thought that someone was guilty but had to say not guilty, or the other way around, because the prosecution didn't do a good job in the case. They didn't feel like they brought it up. They didn't, oh, you're not even here, dude. You can't be here. You can't, nobody's watching. Have fun reading it to nobody. Have fun reading it to nobody. You're not here, bro. Sorry. Oh. In determining whether people have satisfied their burden of proving the defendant's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, you may consider all the evidence presented, whether by the people or by the defendant. Go back to Twitter. I'm enjoying my PTSD. Imagine somebody getting fucking so triggered over someone they'll never know, someone that doesn't know them, someone that they're so upset about it. We didn't let them call any witnesses. Burden of proof proving the defendant's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. You may consider all the evidence presented, whether by the people or by the defendant. In doing so, however, remember that even though the defendant introduced evidence, the burden of proof remains on the people. So it's not the defendant's. It's not the defendant's case. It's not the defendant doesn't have to prove anything. He's presumed innocent. The state has to do it. Defendant did not testify. The fact that the defendant, and this is in every case again, the fact that the defendant did not testify is not a factor from which any inference unfavorable to the defendant may be drawn. Burden of proof. The defendant is not required to prove that he is not guilty. In fact, the defendant is not required to prove or disprove anything. To the contrary, the people have the burden of proof, proving the defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. That means before you can find the defendant guilty of a crime, the people must prove beyond a reasonable doubt every element of the crime, including that the defendant is the person who committed the crime. Every element has to be met by the people beyond a reasonable doubt. The burden of proof never shifts from the people to the defendant. If the people fail to satisfy their burden of proof, you must find the defendant not guilty. And if the people satisfy their burden of proof, you must find the defendant guilty. So that's as simple as it can be, right? You either have, if they met their proof, it's guilty. If they didn't, he's not guilty. And you have to abide by that. What does our law mean? This is reasonable doubt. What does our law mean when it requires proof of guilt beyond a reasonable doubt? The law uses the term proof beyond a reasonable doubt to tell you how convincing the evidence of guilt must be to permit a verdict of guilty. The law recognizes that in dealing with human affairs, there are very few things in this world that we know with absolute certainty. Therefore, the law does not require the people to prove a defendant guilty beyond all possible doubt. On the other hand, it is not sufficient to prove that the defendant is probably guilty. In a criminal case, the proof of guilt must be stronger than that. It must be beyond reasonable doubt. So is there a chance that Trump was actually living on Venus during this time and someone else did all this and it just looked a lot like him, talked like him, acted like him? Sure, but that's not a reasonable doubt to have. A reasonable doubt is an honest doubt of the defendant's guilt for which a reason exists based upon the nature and quality of the evidence. It is an actual doubt, not an imaginary doubt. It is a doubt that a reasonable person acting in a matter of this importance would be likely to entertain because of the evidence that was presented or because of the lack of convincing evidence. So either the evidence presented or missing evidence, you have to have a reason, and based on that reason, it's reasonable that he did not commit the crime. Proof of guilt beyond a reasonable doubt is proof that leaves you so firmly convinced of the defendant's guilt that you have no reasonable doubt of the existence of any element of the crime or of the defendant's identity as the person who committed the crime. In determining whether the people have proven the defendant's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, you should be guided solely by a full and fair evaluation of the evidence. After carefully evaluating the evidence, each of you must decide. Have any of you guys ever been on a jury? Yeah, I mean, but that's our system, right? We leave, like, let's say let's say an overzealous prosecutor brought a case and there's literally no evidence that is beyond a reasonable doubt. There's a lot of reasonable doubt. Technically, a jury could be like, fuck him, we're doing it anyways. But that's the system we've all agreed on, right? If you don't like that system, you got to change it, but that's what we've all agreed on. Technically, a jury could do whatever the fuck they want. A jury could say, we're not convicting somebody because they're black. In their heads, I mean, there would be appeals and stuff like that, but in their heads, they're all thinking at the same time, we don't convict black people, or we don't convict white people, or we don't convict Atsuko because she's Chinese. But that's what we've all done. I did a jury for adult. Did it go all the way to like deliberations and shit, or was there a plea signed? Have you made it all the way through all this, like all the way to like, oh, that's cool. I've been on a jury, like every time I've been summoned for jury duty, I've usually been dismissed. I've always been dismissed, I guess. I've never made it to like, we're going to vote. I did, I got like, basically, I got accepted into a jury. And then at some point while they were setting dates and shit, a plea deal happened. That's the furthest I've ever made it. And determine whether the people have proven the defendant's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, you should be guided solely. Oh, we already did that. Fair evaluation of the evidence. After carefully evaluating the evidence, each of you must decide whether the evidence convinces you beyond a reasonable doubt of the defendant's guilt. Whatever your verdict may be, it must not rest upon baseless speculation, nor may it be influenced in any way by bias, prejudice, sympathy, or by a desire to bring an end to your deliberations or to avoid an unpleasant duty. I guess the only way this judge's actions, I guess the way he laid this out, which he laid it out by the law, would come into effect is if, let's say, only 11 people said guilty and one person said not guilty, or whatever number. Let's say it wasn't a unanimous decision, and then the jury was confused and thought, oh, well, I thought we didn't have to be I thought we didn't have to be whatever. I thought we didn't have to be unanimous, and he would still be guilty. But that didn't. It was still a unanimous decision. I got polled for jury duty. My mom and dad. Well, I guess everybody around here believes. So it's kind of random whether you get called for jury duty or not. But a lot of people, well, at least in Tennessee, it is. If you pay taxes at all and live in the state of Tennessee, if you've ever on a census in Tennessee, any of that, it all goes into a database. But a lot of people around here believe that if you didn't register to vote, you wouldn't get called for jury duty. So a lot of people don't register to vote because they don't want jury duty, which is crazy. If you are not convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty of a charged crime, you must find the defendant not guilty of that crime. And if you are convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty of a charged crime, you must find the defendant guilty of that crime. Introduction. Credibility of witnesses. As judges of the facts, you alone determine the truthfulness and accuracy of the testimony of each witness. So you determine whether you believe them or not. You must decide whether a witness told the truth and was accurate or instead testified falsely or was mistaken. You must also decide what importance to give to the testimony you accept as truthful and accurate. It is the quality of testimony that is controlling, not the number of witnesses who testify. You can have 1,000 eyewitnesses, but people don't realize they have a bias towards eyewitness accounts. People love eyewitness accounts, but that's some of the most unreliable testimony that exists or that ever will exist. Eyewitness testimony is insane, right? But people have a bias for it. Like they think if someone saw you do it, that it's you. But it's been proven again and again and again and again and again. Except in whole or in part, falsus in uno. If you find that any witness has intentionally testified falsely as to a material fact, you may disregard that witness's entire testimony. So if you think that they've lied about any material fact of the case, then you can throw out their entire testimony. A material fact is basically anything. I wanted to get the legal definition, make sure I wasn't wrong. It's basically anything relevant to the decision to be made of the case. So the actual definition says a material fact that is a reasonable person would recognize as relevant to a decision to be made, as distinguished from an insignificant fact. So it's not trivial. It's not insignificant. It's any fact that's reasonable that has to do with the case or the decision. Or you may disregard so much as you find untruthful. So you don't have to throw it all out. You can mark them off as unreliable or just the part that they testified about and accept so much of it as you find to have been truthful and accurate. So I guess this would be confusing. If you knew, let's say they called one witness and they testified and the next witness wasn't like an expert witness and said they lied about one thing in their testimony. Would you know without these instructions whether to throw it all out or just a part of it out or just the part they talked about or if you were allowed to? Michael Cohen did make the payment. Credibility factors. There is no particular formula for evaluating the truthfulness and accuracy of another person's statements or testimony. You bring to this process all of your varied experiences. In life, you frequently decide the truthfulness and accuracy of statements made to you by other people. The same factors used to make those decisions should be used in the case when evaluating the testimony. In general, some of the factors that you may wish to consider in evaluating the testimony of a witness are as follows. Did the witness have an opportunity before the trial? Everyone in mainstream media said Trump paid her. Well, so technically, if Trump would have told Michael Cohen to pay her. So the issue here is people believe that Michael Cohen was directed. Michael Cohen himself said he was directed by Trump at his campaign. None of that's illegal. You can pay somebody to sign an NDA. It happens all the time. The problem is if that was donated, if that money was paid to help Trump win and not declared as a donation. So their defense basically here was that the money was paid to save Trump's marriage. That's not illegal. You can pay money to shut somebody up to save your marriage. You can't pay money to shut somebody up so it doesn't cost you losing a campaign and not declare it as some type of donation to the campaign. Some of the factors. Did the witness have an opportunity to see or hear the events about which he or she testified? Did the witness have the ability to recall those events accurately? Was the testimony of the witness plausible and likely to be true, or was it implausible and not likely to be true? Was the testimony of the witness consistent or inconsistent with other testimony in the evidence or evidence in the case? Did the manner in which the witness testified reflect upon the truthfulness of that witness's testimony? To what extent, if any, did the witness's background, training, education, or experience affect the believability of that witness's testimony? Did the witness have a conscious bias, hostility, or some other attitude that affected the truthfulness of the witness's testimony? Also, when we're talking about Michael Cohen paying, even if Trump didn't know, but the campaign knew, Michael Cohen knew they were doing this so it didn't look bad for Trump in the election, then it's still an election finance violation. Did the witness show an unconscious bias, that is, a bias that the witness may have even unknowingly acquired from the stereotypes and attitudes about the people or group of people? And if so, did the unconscious bias impact the witness's ability to be truthful and accurate? Motive. You may consider whether a witness had or did not have a motive to lie. If a witness had a motive to lie, you may consider whether and to what extent, if any, that motive affected the truthfulness of that witness's testimony. So you get to do the, you get to pick. If a witness did not have a motive to lie, you may consider that as well in evaluating the witness's truthfulness. You may consider whether so this is benefit. You may consider whether a witness hopes for or expects to receive a benefit for testifying, payment or a job or whatever. If so, you may consider whether and to what extent, if affected, the truthfulness of the witness' testimony. If it affected the truthfulness of the witness's testimony. Interest, lack of interest. Yeah, it's falsifying business records on the state level. You may consider whether a witness has any interest in the outcome of the case, or instead, whether the witness has no such interest. You are not required to reject the testimony of an interested witness or to accept the testimony of a witness who has no interest in the outcome of the case. You may, however, consider whether an interest in the outcome or lack of such interest affected the truthfulness of the witness testimony. Okay. Previous criminal conduct. You may consider whether a witness has been convicted of a crime or has engaged in criminal conduct, and if so, whether and to what extent it affects your evaluation of truthfulness or that witness's testimony. So this would be like if you had somebody that maybe they had not such an outstanding past, or maybe they've been charged with perjury before, like lying in front of a court. Maybe they were also a drug dealer. Maybe they're both drug dealers. Who the fuck knows? But you have to take the previous criminal conduct as one of the stipulations here. And what extent it may affect your evaluation of the truthfulness of the witness testimony. You are not required to reject the testimony of a witness who has been convicted of a crime or has engaged in criminal conduct, or to accept. You're not required either one. You're not required for either one of those. You may, however, consider whether a witness's criminal conviction or conduct has affected the truthfulness of the witness's testimony. Inconsistencies. Inconsistent statements. You may consider whether a witness made statements at this trial that are inconsistent with each other. You may also consider whether a witness made previous statements that are inconsistent with his or her testimony at trial. So this would be like they were calling Stormy Daniels, saying like her story changed here, her story changed there. She said this once, she said that once. Something about the bodyguards were there so you couldn't leave or whatever. You may consider whether a witness testified to a fact here at trial that the witness omitted to state at a prior time, when it would have been reasonable and logical for the witness to have stated that fact. In determining whether it would have been reasonable and logical for the witness to have stated the omitted fact, you may consider whether the witness's attention was called to the matter or whether the witness was specifically asked about it. So maybe a witness doesn't mention that they stopped at the gas station before they went to the trap house. But if the lawyer in their first statement, But if the lawyer says, oh, did you stop anywhere else? And they're like, did you specifically stop at the 7-Eleven? And they remember it. Well, that's because they were directed to remember it. If a witness has made such inconsistent statements or omissions, you may consider whether and to what extent they affect the truthfulness or accuracy of that witness's testimony here at the trial. The contents of a prior inconsistent statement are not proof of what happened. You may use evidence of a prior inconsistent statement only to evaluate the truthfulness or accuracy of the witness' testimony here at the trial. Consistency. You may consider whether a witness's testimony is consistent with testimony of other witnesses or with other evidence in the case. If there are inconsistencies by or among witnesses, you may consider as to whether they were significant inconsistencies related to important facts, or instead were kind of minor inconsistencies that one might expect from multiple witnesses in the same event. Nobody's here. Nobody. Right? I'm reading it to nobody. By myself with my PTSD. And I'm apparently a homosexual. I vape too. Enjoy your vape. Witness pretrial preparation. You may have heard testimony about the prosecution and defense counsel speaking to a witness about the case before a witness testified at this trial. The law permits the prosecution and defense counsel to speak to a witness about the case before the witness testifies, and permits the prosecutor and defense counsel to review with the witness the questions that they will or may be asked at trial, including the questions that may be asked on cross-examination. You have also heard testimony that a witness read or reviewed certain materials pertaining to this case before the witness testified at the trial. The law permits the witness to do so. You can't specifically coach them into saying something directly, especially if it's a lie, but you can work with them on it. Speaking to a witness about his or her testimony and permitting to a witness to review materials pertaining to the case before the witness testifies is a normal part of preparing for trial. It is not improper as long as it is not suggested that the witness depart from the truth. You just can't say, hey, you need to lie, basically. But lots of witnesses go through coaching, basically. It's traumatic. It's probably, it's like deer in spotlight when you're up on the stand. Identification. The people have the burden of proving beyond a reasonable doubt not only that a charged crime was committed, but that the defendant is the person who committed that crime. Thus, even if you're convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that a charged crime was committed by someone, you cannot convict the defendant of that crime unless you are also convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that he is the person who committed the crime. So even if you're sure that the crime was committed by someone, you have to know that this person committed it as well. The person at trial, not just someone. Accomplice as a matter of law. Under our law, Michael Cohen is an accomplice because there is evidence that he participated in a crime based upon conduct involved in the allegations here against the defendant. Our law is especially concerned about the testimony of an accomplice who implicates another in the commission of a crime, particularly when the accomplice has received, expects, or hopes for a benefit in return for their testimony. Therefore, our law provides that a defendant may not be convicted of any crime upon the testimony of an accomplice unless it is supported by corroborative evidence tending to connect the defendant with the commission of a crime. In other words, even if you find the testimony of Michael Cohen to be believable, you may not convict the defendant solely upon that testimony unless you also find that it was corroborated by other evidence tending to connect the defendant with the commission of a crime. That corroborative evidence need not by itself prove that a crime was committed or that the defendant is guilty. What the law requires is that there be evidence that tends to connect the defendant with the commission of a crime charged in such a way as may reasonably satisfy that the accomplice is telling the truth about the defendant's participation in that crime. You couldn't just have a guy that said, oh, he was with me, blah, blah, blah. If that was the only evidence, it doesn't work. In determining whether there is a necessary corroboration, you may consider whether there is a material believable evidence apart from the testimony of Michael Cohen, which itself tends to connect with the defendant with the commission of a crime. You may also consider whether there is material believable evidence apart from the testimony of Michael Cohen, which, while it does not itself tend to connect the defendant with the commission of a crime charged, it nonetheless so harmonizes with the narrative of the accomplice as to satisfy you that the accomplice is telling the truth about the defendant's participation in the crime, and thereby tends to connect the defendant to the commission of that crime. And again, someone said it earlier, a jury could go rogue. The charged crimes. I will now instruct you on the law applicable to the charged offenses. So that was all general. Now we're going to go into this is actually about the crimes that are charged here. I will now instruct you to the application of the charged offenses. That offense is falsifying business records in the first degree, 34 counts. Any case could be overturned. I mean, if it gets overturned, we'll cover it just the same. Accessorial liability. Our law requires that two or more individuals can act jointly to commit a crime, and that in certain circumstances, each can be held criminally liable for the acts of the others. In that situation, those persons can be said to be acting in concert with each other. Our law defines the circumstances under which one person may be criminally liable for the conduct of another. That definition as follows. When one person engages in conduct which constitutes an offense, a crime, another is criminally liable for such conduct when, acting with the state of mind required for the commission of that offense, he or she solicits, requests, commands, importunes, or intentionally aids such person to engage in such conduct. So this is when you're an accomplice to a crime. That's the definition. Under that definition, mere presence at the scene of a crime, even with knowledge that the crime is taking place, or mere association with the perpetrator of a crime, does not by itself make a defendant criminally liable for that crime. In order for the defendant to be held criminally liable for the conduct of another which constitutes an offense, you must find beyond reasonable doubt, one, these are so you have to find both of these, that he solicited, requested, commanded, importuned, or intentionally aided that person to engage in that conduct, and that he did so with the state of mind required for the commission of the offense. I mean, anybody can run in here and say it's going to be overturned. I don't know that it is. I mean, I know that he's going to appeal it. We'll see. If it is proven beyond a reasonable doubt that everybody becomes an expert suddenly. If it is proven beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is criminally liable for the conduct of another, the extent or degree of the defendant's participation in the crime does not matter. A defendant proven beyond a reasonable doubt to be criminally liable for the conduct of another in the commission of a crime is as guilty of the crime as if the defendant personally had committed every act constituting the crime. So if you find they did these two things, if you find they solicited, requested, commanded, importuned, or intentionally aided, and they did it with a state of mind required for the commission of the crime, it don't matter if they just did the smallest piece, they're just as guilty. The people have, if he did it to break another law, not if he did it and was convicted of breaking another law, if he did it to break another law. He doesn't have to be convicted of that law. The people have the burden. You don't know if he broke another law. You're just in here saying he hasn't been charged. You realize I break law. I'm speeding when I leave here tonight. I'm breaking a law. The people have the burden of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant acted with the state of mind required for the commission of the crime, and either personally or by acting in concert with another person committed each of the remaining elements of the crime. Your verdict on each count you consider, whether guilty or not guilty, must be unanimous. Your verdict on each count you consider, whether guilty or not guilty, must be unanimous. That seems really confusing already. Very confusing. In order to find the defendant guilty, however, you need not be unanimous on whether the defendant committed the crime personally or by acting in concert with another, or both. Yes, you can. You just got to prove that he broke the other law. You're saying that they didn't charge him. You realize you can break a law without being charged or convicted. Exactly. If you get in an accident while speeding, you could have a higher charge because of the speeding, but not directly found guilty of speeding. The FCC did not say he didn't. The FCC said after he left office, that they weren't going to pursue the case because they thought it would be hard to prove intent. They didn't say they couldn't. They didn't say he didn't commit a crime. They didn't say he never committed a crime. They didn't say he didn't do it. They said it would be hard to prove intent. I will now instruct you on the law applicable to the charged offense. That offense is falsifying business records in the first degree, 34 counts. All right, here we go. Falsifying business records in the first degree. Under our law, a person is guilty of falsifying business records in the first degree when, with intent to defraud, that includes an intent to commit another crime or to aid or conceal the commission thereof, that person, you just have to have an intent to commit another crime. You don't even have to commit another crime. In black and white right there, if you intend to commit another crime, but you don't successfully do so, but you were intending to, you don't even have to commit the other crime. So if you falsifying business records in the first degree when with intent to defraud, that includes an intent to commit another crime or to aid or conceal the commission thereof, that person makes or causes a false entry in the business records of an enterprise. The following terms used in that definition have special meaning. Enterprise. Enterprise means an entity of one or more persons, corporate or otherwise, public or private, engaged in business, commercial, professional, industrial, social, political, or governmental activity. Business record means any writing or article, including computer data or a computer program kept or maintained by an enterprise for the purposes of evidencing or reflecting its condition or activity. Intent. Intent means conscious, objective, or conscious, objective, or purpose. Thus, a person acts with intent to defraud when his or her conscious objective or purpose is to do so. So you have to have a conscious purpose too. That you have to have the intent. That's what the FEC said, that it would be very hard to prove intent. Intent does not require premeditation. In other words, intent does not require advanced planning, nor is it necessary that the intent be in a person's mind for any particular period of time. The intent can be formed and need only exist at the very moment. So you don't have to have premeditated intent. You could have intent as soon as it pops in your head. You think, oh, if I do this, that'll cause that. And boom, say, yeah, let's do it. The intent can be formed and need only exist at the very moment the person engages in prohibited conduct or acts to cause the prohibited result, and not at any earlier time. The question naturally arises as to how to determine whether a defendant had intent required for the commission of a crime. To make that determination in this case, you must decide if the required intent can be inferred beyond a reasonable doubt from the proven facts. In doing so, you may consider the person's conduct and all of the circumstances surrounding that conduct, including but not limited to. So you can't get in someone's mind, right? Instead, you have to infer it by all the conduct surrounding it and the person's conduct. Using the following, but not limited to. Here's some of the following, but not limited to. What, if anything, did the person do or say? What results, if any, followed the person's conduct? Was the result the natural, necessary, and probable consequences of that conduct? Therefore, in this case, from the facts you find to have been proven, decide whether you can infer beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant had the intent required for the commission of the crime. Now he's going to get even more particular in intent to defraud. As I previously explained, a person acts with the intent to defraud when his or her conscious objective or purpose is to do so. In order to prove an intent to defraud, the people need not prove that the defendant acted with the intent to defraud any particular person or entity. A general intent to defraud any person or in any entity suffices. Intent to defraud is also not considered to an intent to deprive another of property or money and can extend beyond economic concerns. So you can defraud someone and have intent to defraud someone even if you wouldn't gain money or land or property or whatever. It doesn't matter. You can still intend to defraud somebody. Intent to commit or conceal another crime. For the crime of falsifying business records in the first degree, the intent to defraud must include an intent to commit another crime. You don't have to commit that crime. You just have to have an intent to commit that crime, or to aid or conceal the commission thereof. If you intend to commit a crime but fail or don't by accident, not you're busted or whatever, you still have intent to commit that crime easily. Under our law, although the people must prove an intent to commit another crime or to aid or conceal the commission thereof, they need not prove that the other crime was in fact committed, aided, or concealed. There it is in black and white. Under our law, although the people must prove an intent to commit another crime or to aid or conceal the commission thereof, they need not prove that the other crime was in fact committed, aided, or concealed. You just have to have intent to commit another crime. It doesn't say you have to do this and committed another crime or aided another crime or concealed it. You just had to have intent, especially with concealed. If your intent was to conceal something and it still come out, it's not like you could just take all that away. You intended to conceal it. New York election law predicate. The people allege that the other crime of the defendant intended to commit, aid, or conceal is a violation of New York election law 17152. Of New York election law 17152. Section 17152 of the New York election law provides that any two or more persons who conspire to promote or prevent the election of any person to a public office by unlawful means, and which conspiracy is acted upon by one or more of the parties thereto, shall be guilty of conspiracy to promote or prevent an election. That's federal! Wait, that's a New York law. That's federal! That's a New York law. That's New York election law, section 17-152. Federal! Kind of seems weird you screamed that like 50 times now, doesn't it? That's why I didn't respond, but okay. Under our law, a person is guilty of such a conspiracy when, with intent that conduct be performed that would promote or prevent the election of a person. So with intent, you intended to do something or perform something that would either promote or prevent someone from being elected. Federal! To a public office by unlawful means. So something unlawful that you intend to do that would promote or prevent someone from being elected to public office. Where'd Team Federal go? I don't even see him. He retired that quick? He or she agrees with one or more persons to engage or cause the performance of such conduct. So just intent. It doesn't actually have to happen. It's just intent. Any public office at all. To a public office. It doesn't matter if it's a state or federal. It's a public office. Knowledge of a conspiracy does not by itself make the defendant a co-conspirator. The defendant must... It doesn't matter. It's a New York crime. This jury said he did. You know that you can be charged federally with something and not be charged in your state, or you can be charged in state and not be charged federally, right? You screamed federal 115 times in my chat because it was a federal law, and only you do it is a federal. And it's a New York state law that was the contributing crime. Knowledge does not make you a co-conspirator just because you know about it. The defendant must intend that the conduct be performed that would promote or prevent the election of a person to public office by unlawful means.
Captain 318 just resubscribed.
Thank you for the resubscription. I
19
appreciate
months.
it. 19 months. There you go. Right? So you just because you know the conspiracy doesn't mean shit. You actually have to intend to help or hurt someone be elected. So honestly, what I think I said this on the other video last night. This money was paid, I believe, the jury believes that Trump knew about it, so it wouldn't come out right before the election and hurt him. Their defense kind of was it was to save his marriage. Weird time to try to save your marriage right before the election, but that's for the jury to decide. I'm not part of the jury. You are the jury. Yeah, so there's more to it, Trash Panda. So, like, when we're talking about the Peckers guy you'd have to watch the show from the other night. So the Peckers guy claims that him and Trump agreed that they would buy any of these stories. And they did buy a story of anybody coming out with these sexual allegations. And then what was supposed to happen is Peckers buys it for AMI, and then Trump reimburses him. And they actually had a reimbursement agreement written up, and Trump was going to pay him back. But what happened was the Peckers guy went and talked to his lawyer and said, hey, I bought this story, blah, 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 just making sure this all straight up. His lawyer told him it wasn't illegal for him to buy the story at all. He said, yeah, you can buy that story and trash it and hide it or whatever. Then he went back to his lawyer and said, okay, Trump's going to reimburse me. And his lawyer told him, hell no. Do not let them reimburse you. That's a violation of election law. Do not let them pay you back. So he called him back and literally told Michael Cohen, tear up the contract. Don't do it. Him and Trump were friends. He said, don't do it. This is a violation of election law. And this was months before they did the Stormy Daniels one. So they knew that this reimbursement thing going on was a violation of election law. They already did one. So they knew exactly that this was a violation because and then Michael Cohen was supposed to rip that up, but he left it in his office. And it was seized when the FBI raided his office to prosecute him. At least that's the way I understood it when we read all the documents from it the other night. Thus, a person acts with the intent that conduct be performed that would promote or prevent the election of a person to public office by unlawful means when his or her conscious objective or purpose is that such conduct be performed. So we can basically throw out the prevent. This is to promote. Right? They're hiding this, potentially, according to the jury, they're hiding this to promote Trump's win. They're not trying to prevent Trump from winning, right? They're hiding this to promote Trump's win. So was his objective that this be performed so it didn't hurt his campaign, right? So it promoted his campaign. Evidence that defendant was present when others agreed to engage in the performance of a crime does not by itself. So Michael Cohen and, somebody on the campaign could be sitting there talking about it. And just because Trump's there doesn't make him guilty. It doesn't show that he personally agreed to engage in the conspiracy. Although you must conclude unanimously, this is what everybody's freaking out about. Now listen, and you tell me if this is confusing. Although you must conclude unanimously that the defendant conspired to promote or prevent the election of any person to a public office by unlawful means, you need not be unanimous as to what those unlawful means were. So you can say that I think he did A, and that was what caused him to promote or prevent the election of someone. Or B, because there's several claims that they made. The prosecution said he did A, B, and C to promote his election. You don't have to agree that he did A, B, and C. You don't have to agree that he did C and A, or that he did B and C, or A and C, or B and A. But if he did any of those, and let's say juror 1 thinks he did A, juror 2 thinks he did B, juror 3 thinks he did C, juror 4 thinks he did all of them. You don't have to be unanimous on that, but you must conclude unanimously that the defendant conspired to promote or prevent the election of a person in public office by unlawful means. You do not have to be unanimous on which unlawful means he broke. He goes on, in determining whether the defendant conspired to promote or prevent the election of any person in public office by unlawful means, you may consider the following. So these are the three things that you're allowed to consider. Did he do 1? Did he do 2? Or did he do 3? You don't have to all agree he did 1, 2, and 3. You don't all have to agree he did 1. You don't all have to agree he did 3. Any of these. You're allowed to consider any of these. Violations of Federal Election Campaign Act, otherwise known as FECA. That's 1. 2, the falsification of other business records. Or 3, violation of tax laws. If any of those were breached in the commission of this, even though he's not being convicted of them, if you think he did those by way of doing the promote or prevent an election to any person in public office by unlawful means, then you have to be unanimous on that. Then your vote is guilty. And then it goes on to explain each one. The Federal Election Campaign Act. The first of the people's theories of unlawful means. So it goes on and says, this is the people's theories of unlawful means. There's 3 of them, and these are the ones you can choose from. You don't have to agree, but you got to have one of these in connection with the first crime. The first of the people's theories of unlawful means, which I will now define for you, is the Federal Election Campaign Act. Under the Federal Election Campaign Act, it is unlawful for an individual to willfully make a contribution to any candidate with respect to any election for federal office, including the office of President of the United States, which exceeds a certain limit. In 2015 and 2016, that limit was $2,700. It is also unlawful under the Federal Election Campaign Act for any corporation to willfully make a contribution of any amount to a candidate or candidate's campaign in connection with any federal election, or for any person to cause such a corporate contribution. For purposes of these prohibitions, an expenditure made in cooperation, consultation, or concert with, or at the request or suggestion of a candidate or his agents shall be considered to be a contribution to such candidate. So, an expenditure made in cooperation, consultation, or concert with, or at the request of, or even a suggestion, even I suggest you buy me a fucking car or whatever. A candidate or his agents, people on his campaign, his campaign people, shall be considered a contribution to such candidate. The terms contribution and expenditure include anything of value, including any purchase, payment, loan, or advance. This was kind of treated like a loan, right? Michael Cohen used his line of credit on his house to pay it. Or advance made by, and then Rudy Giuliani comes back and says, oh, he paid him back. Like, I hate how everybody screams. This is the system. If you don't like the jury system, this is the system we agreed on, right? All the evidence was, you think all 12 people in the jury were just like, this doesn't meet any of the requirements, but fuck Trump. Because his lawyers had a chance to throw people out. They had a chance to pick their own jurors. They got to pick as well. Like, I'm looking something up. Hold on. They have to assure that of impartiality and inadequate to cure an implied bias. What else? Party must exhaust peremptory challenges to appeal trial ruling denying challenge. Improper remarks by judge at jury selection. Attorney misconduct during jury selection. Allegedly improper comment made by the prosecutor during the jury selection. That contention is not preserved for our review inasmuch as defense counsel failed to request any further relief after the court sustained his objection. Failure to timely exercise challenge. Court has discretion to allow. Failure to object waives appeal. Time limits for jury selection process. 60 minutes is reasonable. If so, there's like 60 minutes can be reasonable, but 15 minutes could be unreasonable. It depends on what's going on. Under circumstances, we conclude that non-racial bias advanced the prosecutor for challenging prospective jurors. Numbers 2 and 8, pretextual according. So you can't be biased against them for those reasons. The commissioner of juries shall select the names of prospective jurors or cause them to be selected at random from the sources provided in selection in section 506. The selection may be accompanied by mechanical means or by any other method designed to implement these purposes of this article. A jury shall be composed of 6 persons, the persons who constitute the jury. The first 6 persons who appear as their names are drawn and called are approved as indifferent between the parties and are not discharged or excused, must be sworn and constitute the jury to try the issue. Alternate jurors. Challenges generally. An objection to the qualification of a jury must be made by a challenge unless the parties stipulate to excuse him. A challenge of a juror or a challenge to the panel or array of jurors shall be tried and determined by the court. The plaintiff or plaintiffs shall have a combined total of 3 peremptory challenges plus 1 challenge for every 2 alternate jurors. The defendant or defendants or any third-party defendant or defendants shall have a combined total of 3 peremptory challenges, plus 1 peremptory challenge for every 2 alternate jurors. The court, in its discretion, this is for civil, but still, the court, in its discretion, before the examination of jurors begins, may grant an equal number of additional challenges to both sides as may be appropriate. In any case, where a side has 2 or more parties, the court, in its discretion, may allocate the side's combined total preemptory challenges among the, so the judge can even give more challenges. Let's get criminal. The jury is paid $40 a day. If service extends beyond 30 days, the court may authorize an additional $6 per day per juror. The fee is paid by the state employer, depending on how long does it take jurors to get paid. Age restriction. Let's do this. Trump, New York. I wonder if they talked any about the jury selection. What we know about the jury. Legal experts told Courthouse News that Donald Trump's defense erred by keeping 2 Manhattan lawyers on the jury panel. You rarely have 1, much less 2. After a mixed jury of a dozen, New Yorkers unanimously delivered guilty verdicts of all 34 felony counts against Donald Trump on Thursday afternoon. Legal experts told Courthouse News that 2 lawyers on the panel may have helped other jurors see through the noise in this case and focus on the actual law behind the charges of falsifying business records as part of a scheme to illegally influence the 2016 election. Deliberations lasted roughly 12 hours over 2 days before jurors reached a unanimous guilty verdict on all 34 counts of falsifying business records, making the presumptive Republican presidential nominee in November's election the first former U.S. president in the nation's history to be convicted of a crime. The jury, 7 men, 5 women, included 2 attorneys, a software engineer, an e-commerce sales professional, a security engineer, a teacher, a speech therapist, an investment banker, and a retired wealth manager. Former federal prosecutor Nima Rahami told Courthouse News he thought it was a mistake for Trump's lawyers not to strike the 2 lawyers from the trial jury. That never ever happens, he said. You rarely have 1, much less 2. Ramani, I think, said lawyer jurors can be so powerful in the deliberation room because they're able to set aside the irrelevant spectacle surrounding the case and instead focus on the jury instructions and the actual law. So they had, not only do I think these instructions are decently clear, as clear as legal jargon can be, but what the fuck? they had 2 lawyers in there to help explain it because they're deliberating together. They had 2 lawyers in there to help clarify any legal questions they had. Like, it seems like if they had questions about this, they all talk to each other, right? They're not barred from asking each other questions or discussing it. That's what they do. They deliberate together. When you have lawyers on the panel, they tend to sway the deliberations, so you have to make sure that they're on your side, he said, noting that as a trial litigator, he nearly always uses peremptory strikes to remove lawyers from the potential jury pool. Jurors are very, very risky unless they're on your side, Rahmani added. Jurors like that are high risk and certainly not helpful if the law is not in your favor. The 12-person jury impaneled 6 weeks ago after more than 2 days of jury selection found Trump guilty. Oh, here's jury selection link. Hold on, let's see if there's any more things about it. With jury selection, Trump could face an uphill battle in hush money case. A jury is set for Donald Trump's historic Manhattan trial in which the former president is being accused of falsifying business records to cover up hush money payments made to extramarital partners during the 2016 presidential election. He's the first U.S. president in history, blah, blah, blah. He'll be flanked by his legal team in a New York courthouse where 12 jurors will decide whether or not he'll become a convicted felon. Those 12 jurors finalized after just more than 2 days of jury selection will be a group of highly educated Manhattanites. 7 are men, 5 are women. Most follow a myriad of news outlets and have at least a bachelor's degree. 2 are attorneys. None indicated that they've supported Donald Trump in the past. I think it's going to be very difficult for him to get a full acquittal. Renato Stable, an attorney and jury consultant, told Courthouse News after the jury was selected. I think putting 2 lawyers on the jury was a bold move, especially by the defense. They could have struck those 2 people. They didn't. I like his chances from what I've seen so far of ending up with a hung jury, he added, but I think that's the best he's going to do here. The jury selection process was quicker than many expected, but it still tested the patience of both judge and the former president, the latter of whom appeared to doze off at least once during the proceedings. According to Stable, the outcome of the case could largely hinge on the particulars of the jury. In this case, it is the most important part of the entire trial, he said. Unlike the vast majority of criminal cases, everybody, and I mean everybody, knows the defendant. Because of this, New York Supreme Court Justice Juan Merchan was more hesitant to boot potential jurors who had heard negative things about Trump in the past or who disagreed with him politically. One juror who made the cut even admitted that Trump's persona wasn't her cup of tea, but most people aren't. Most were hesitant to reveal any specific political leanings, however. In cases where there are political elements, we do see a very strong correlation between political affiliation and verdict outcome, Stable said. We just do. It's not hypothetical. It's not speculative. It's something we can see. And so that's why everybody is concluding that this is going to largely break down across party lines, and that disfavors Donald Trump. Each prospective juror this week had to answer aloud a 42-part questionnaire before the voir dire process began. On the sheet, they were asked what news they consume, whether they ever attended a Trump rally, and more. Their political affiliations were not requested. Merchan, I think is the way you say it, in March ordered the jurors' names to be kept secret. Still, the detailed questionnaire, coupled with scrupulous voir dire process, paints a picture of the 12-person jury on Trump's historical criminal case. Juror 1, a man who works in sales, originally from Ireland, he said of Trump's case, I've heard some of them. He has a wide range of media consumption, including the New York Times, the Daily Mail, some Fox News, and even MSNBC. Juror 2, an investment banker who follows a lot of political accounts on Twitter, including Michael Cohen and an account that reposts all of Donald Trump's Truth Social posts. He reads the New York Times and consumes coverage on conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East. He hasn't read Trump's books, but says he's seen numerous quotes from Trump's book, The Art of the Deal. That guy seems like he might be on Trump's side. I don't know. A corporate lawyer originally from Oregon, he told the court that he is actually not super familiar with the other charges Trump faces. I don't really follow the news that closely. A little embarrassing to say, the juror said. He gets his news from the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and Google. Juror 4, a California native working as a security engineer. He was on a criminal jury before he moved to New York, but told the court that he couldn't remember the verdict. He said that he reads a smattering of news publications, but enjoys listening to comedy podcasts. Juror 5, a woman who works as a language arts teacher. She said that President Trump speaks his mind. Despite being self-identified person of color with friends who have strong opinions of Trump, she said she doesn't have a strong opinion herself. She said that she doesn't really care for the news, but gets it from Google and TikTok. TikTok's usually favorable to Trump. It has more people that are favorable to Trump than it doesn't. There are a lot of lefties on there too. Juror 6, a software engineer who told the court that she can look at Trump like any other person on trial and will be fair and impartial. Her media consumption consists of the New York Times and TikTok, she said. Juror 7, a middle-aged man and civil litigator originally from North Carolina. I don't know anything about election finance, he said. He said he was ambivalent about Trump, liking some things about him, but disliking others. I'm not sure I know anything about his character, he added. I'm a litigator, so I take the law seriously and I take the judge's instructions very seriously. He told the court that he's a frequent WNYC listener. Juror 8, a retired wealth manager originally from Lebanon, who said that he has lots of friends in the financial field. He said he doesn't have strong opinions on Trump or his current presidential candidacy, and that he gets his news from New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, BBC, and CNBC. Juror 9, a woman originally from New Jersey who works as a speech therapist. I don't watch any news or follow it too closely, she said. Still, she said some morning newsletters have found their way into her email inbox. When asked about Trump, she said she does have opinions, but can be impartial for the purposes of the trial. Juror 10, an Ohio native working in e-commerce who said that he doesn't really follow the news. If anything, it's the New York Times, I guess, he said. He told the court that he enjoys outdoors and listening to psychology podcasts. Juror 11, a woman originally from California who admitted that Trump wasn't her cup of tea. She said that he comes across as selfish and self-serving based on his public persona, but insisted that she isn't biased against him as a person. She said she watches late-night television, but otherwise doesn't follow the news. Juror 12, a physical therapist from Minnesota who has her doctorate degree in physical therapy. She listens to sports and religious podcasts and gets her news from the New York Times, USA Today, and CNN. Those are the jurors. Where are we at here? Found guilty of falsifying business records to cover up his reimbursement payment of actress Stormy Daniels' 2016 presidential election to silence her about an extramarital tryst with Trump a decade prior. At the request of the jurors during deliberations, Justice Juan Merchan reread his lengthy instructions about how they were to consider evidence and what can be inferred from it. I think the lawyers were probably trying to explain that to them and probably had him reread the instructions. That was probably the people that were calling for that. I don't know. What if there were 10 Biden and 2 Trump? That's okay? Yes. It's okay in criminal because it only takes one. One person. That would have been 100% okay. It only takes one to throw the whole thing's hung. That's why when such high stakes like criminal, that's why it only takes one. And when we go to civil court, it's 50-50, right? You just have to have the majority. And that's because they're usually much lower stakes. You must set aside any personal opinions or bias you might have in favor or against the defendant, and you must not follow any such opinions to influence your verdict, the judge instructed. Jurors were not given a written copy of those instructions per state court rules, but the judge was allowed to reread the instructions out loud. Many jurors were seen writing notes while Merchan spoke. They also asked to review transcripts of testimony from prosecution witness Michael Cohen and David Pecker, from whom the Manhattan District Attorney accused of conspiring with Trump to bury negative publicity around the 2016 presidential election. Attorney Renato Stabile told Courthouse News he believes that Trump's defense pinned hope on a holdout juror prompting a mistrial and believed the two lawyers on the slate of jurors were going to parse the legal issues very carefully for the rest of the jury. So Trump's own lawyers thought that the two lawyers would help their case. I'm not sure that happened in this case, Stable said Friday. While the jury asked for a readback of the jury instructions, I ultimately think that the instructions may have been too complicated for even the lawyers to fully understand and dissect. I don't think they're that bad, but for that reason, federal! For that reason, I tend to avoid keeping lawyers on any jury unless I'm very confident they will be on my side. That's like fishing for lawyers on your side. In this case, I believe that political affiliation was the super factor in jury selection, was significantly more important than any other jury characteristic. So he's saying, like, the reason they didn't throw out lawyers is because they wanted political affiliation more than anything. And I think that Trump's attorneys probably knew that was an uphill battle. There are people that just hate fucking Trump. So yeah, you might end up having to take a lawyer, but if you think that they don't hate Trump, maybe that's better than a non-lawyer that you're going to find that hates Trump. This just has more of their statements in it. The same thing. Okay, let's continue this. The terms contribution and expenditure include anything of value, including any purchase, payment, or loan or advance made by any person for the purpose of influence any election to federal office. This is just, again, the first tenet again. Under federal law, a third party's payment of a candidate's expenses is deemed to be a contribution to the candidate unless the payment would have been made irrespective of the candidacy. So someone can pay your expenses as long as they would have paid them either way. Let's say you have a sugar daddy. Your sugar daddy, Trump's sugar daddy, could pay all his expenses if they wanted to. But if they're paying your expenses because you're a candidate, and let's say you can't work because you're out on tour or whatever, then that's reciprocal. Like that's a violation of campaign law because you're probably doing that to get something back in return. If a payment would have been made even in the absence of candidacy, the payment should not be treated as a contribution. FECA's definition of contribution and expenditure do not include any cost incurred in covering or carrying a news story, commentary, or editorial by a magazine, periodical publication, or similar press entity. So long as such, if AMI's lawyer wouldn't have told Pecker, do not get reimbursed, you're gonna end up in jail, they probably would have bought this story instead of Cohen, and then probably would have been reimbursed. We may still be here, but it would have been different. It wouldn't have included Michael Cohen. This is called a press exemption. For example, the term legitimate press function includes solicitation letters seeking new subscribers to a publication, falsification of other business records. So this is tenet 2, the second of the people's theories, unlawful means. So this can be one. It could be all of them. It could be none of them, and that means he's innocent, right? Or it could just be one of them, and you don't have to agree on which one. The second of the people's theories of unlawful means, which I will define for you now, is the falsification of other business records. Under New York law, a person is guilty of falsifying business records in the second degree, so not in the first degree. So what they're saying here is you could be convicted of falsification of business records in the first degree if you falsified those business records to falsify other records in the business, right? That's the second crime you need. Falsifying one set to falsify another set. Legend, don't be a cunt about it, okay? Okay. It says, under New York law, a person is guilty of falsifying business records in the second degree when the intent to defraud, he or she makes or causes a false entry into business records of an enterprise. I previously defined for you the terms enterprise business records and intent to defraud. For purposes of determining whether falsifying business records in the second degree was an unlawful means used by a conspiracy to promote or prevent an election here, you may consider the bank records associated with Michael Cohen's account formation paperwork for so he made an LLC to pay this. the bank records associated with Michael Cohen's wire to Keith Davidson. That's Stormy Daniels' attorney. The invoice from Investor Advisory Services, Inc. to Resolutions Consultants, LLC. So from Trump's campaign to Michael Cohen, the 1099 miscellaneous forms that Trump organization issued to Michael Cohen. So his payment, his retainer. Violation of tax laws. This is the third reason. And again, it can be any of them, none of them, whatever. And they don't have to agree. The people's third violation of unlawful means, which I will define for you now, is violation of tax laws. Under the New York State and New York City law, it is unlawful to knowingly supply or submit. By the way, when Binding Terrace was in here saying it has to mean that he violated this federal law, that's not even true, right? That's not even true. There's two more tenets that he could have violated that have nothing to do with federal law. One's about business records, and the other one's about tax law in New York. Under New York State and New York City law, it's unlawful to knowingly supply or submit materially false or fraudulent information in connection with any tax return. Likewise, under federal law, it is unlawful for a person to willfully make any tax return statement or other document that is fraudulent or false as to any material matter, or that the person does not believe to be true and correct as to every material matter. My nephew ran for a local office one time. Or a state local. He ran for a state office one time. And I did some advertising for him through my social media. And I made a video for him. And he paid me for that. He had to, right? Because he was using my time. He has to report it. He has to pay it. He has to do that all of his campaign. And then we had to sit down and make sure every fucking piece of paperwork was right, because he had to turn in all his shit. All his expenses. And not only turning in your campaign stuff, you have to file taxes on all that too. A lot of it's tax exempt if you use it for the campaign for the right reasons, but you still have to file returns on that. Team Federal. Under the when making any tax return statement or other document that is fraudulent or false to any material matter, or that the person does not believe to be true and correct as to every material matter. Under these federal, state, and or local laws, such conduct is unlawful, even if it does not result in underpayment of taxes. I think the biggest thing that some people don't understand is it doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. The statute of limitations doesn't matter. It's not can he be convicted of it. It's did he, and even that's what I was just getting ready to say. I think most people don't understand. If you do something with intent to break a law, it doesn't matter if you actually break it. It doesn't matter if you could be tried for it today. It doesn't matter if they're going to bring charges later, if they already brought charges, if you've been indicted. If you intended, you don't have to break the law. In order for you to find the defendant guilty of the crime of falsifying business records in the first degree, under count 1 of the indictment, the people are required to prove from all the evidence, in this case, beyond a reasonable doubt, each of the following two elements. It's federal. That's all I've got to say. It's federal. Hold on. So first of all, the misdemeanor falsifying records is a 2-year statute of limitations. The first degree, the felony, is 5 years. New York statute of limitations for most felonies, including this one, is 5 years. The earliest charge in Trump's felony indictment was described as occurring on February 14, 2017. And while the indictment was filed on March 30th, 2023, Cuomo's executive orders mean that the deadline for filing the charges in the indictment was extended by 1 year and 47 days, meaning that it was brought just under the wire, and is probably why they made a decision to announce it on the day they did. In the state of New York, the clock can also stop on the statute of limitations when a defendant is continuously outside the state. Trump visited New York rarely over the 4 years of his presidency and now lives mostly in Florida and New Jersey. Mershon did not address this argument in his decision, but he very well could have. The clock often stops in the state of New York when... Sorry, there's an ad that popped up. Get off the fucking screen. When a defendant is continuously or sporadically outside the state in chunks of time. Let me do this. Control F. I'm assuming that's why they filed it when they did. They had extra time because of COVID. So it says the claim is they missed the statute of limitations by a lot because this is very old. They could have brought this. They could have brought this 7 years ago instead of bringing it right in the middle of the election. That's Trump's claim. It says the facts. Judge Mershon in February denied a request from Trump's legal team to dismiss the indictment on the grounds the statute of limitations had passed according to court documents. I want to see that. I'm trying to find the actual document. In his decision, Mershon cited pandemic-era executive orders issued on March 20th, 2020, and in April 2021 by former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo that extended the time limit to filing charges. Is this it? I was trying to see where he addressed the statute of limitations, but it doesn't look like they did. It keeps linking me to the same document, which I don't think he addresses it in. That's his counts. New York statute of limitations for most felonies 5 years. The earliest charge in Trump's felony indictment was described as occurring on February 14, 2017, while the indictment was filed on March 30th, 2023. But Cuomo's executive order meant that the deadline for filing the charges in the indictment was extended by 1 year and 47 days, meaning that it was brought just under the wire. In New York, it could stop. Record level of terrorists. I've been on these Trump claims, Trump fact websites all fucking day because he's tweeted so much out. What's this?
American history. While this defendant may be unlike any other in American history, we arrived at this trial.
The reason the 2-year statute of limitations doesn't matter is because that's just the intent one, right? He just had to have intent. They're not charging him with that. They just had to have intent. Even if he didn't do it, he just had to have intent. The 5-year one matters because that's the main charge, the 5-year statute of limitations. That's in the first degree, and it was extended by Cuomo for 1 year and 47 days.
And ultimately today at this verdict,
years ago,
in the same manner as every other case that comes through the courtroom doors.
I want to see what Trump says right here. Found guilty on all 34 counts. This criminal hush money trial related to money payments made to Stormy Daniels. Donald felony, found guilty. Got it. There was a video of him right here, wasn't it? Is he not talking?
This was a rigged, disgraceful trial. The real verdict is going to be November 5th by the people. This is long from over. Thank you very much.
The real verdict is going to be on election day. Remember all the cryptic shit he said leading up to January 6th? Do you think he'll do the same thing leading up to election? I bet he will. It's going to be, if Trump isn't elected, it's going to be really wild out there. Proud Boys stand by and stand down or whatever. Obviously, he's not going to jail. This doesn't prevent him from running anyway. I do think if he gets it overturned, obviously, whatever. But I do think that he'll face charges for this. I don't think he's going to jail. Court specific, account specific. In order for you to find the defendant guilty of a crime of falsifying business records in the first degree under count 1 of the indictment, the people are required to prove from all the evidence in this case, beyond a reasonable doubt, each of the following elements. That on or about February 14, 2017, in the county of New York and elsewhere, the defendant personally or by acting in concert with another person or persons made or caused a false entry into business records of an enterprise, specifically an invoice from Michael Cohen dated February 14, 2017, marked as a record of the Donald J. Trump revocable trust and kept or maintained by the Trump organization. And the defendant did so with the intent to defraud that included an intent to commit another crime or to aid or conceal the commission thereof. If you find the people have proven beyond a reasonable doubt each of these two elements, you must find the defendant guilty of this crime. If you find the people have not proven beyond a reasonable doubt either one or both of these two elements, you must find the defendants not guilty of this crime. You have now heard me define the law for count 1. There are 33 remaining counts in this indictment, each for falsifying business records in the first degree and each occurring in New York County. The only difference is that each count pertains to a different business record and or possibly a different date. The underlying law applies in the same way for each of the remaining counts. So I will only repeat it in full one more time before I read count 34. Of course, you can ask me to repeat the law in its entirety as many times as you wish, and I will be happy to do so. The second count pertains to an entered detailed ledger for Donald J. Trump, revocable trust, dated February 14, 2017, bearing voucher number, blah, blah, blah. The third count pertains to, so they're on different dates or at different check numbers, different whatever, right? That was all the counts, 25th, 26th. This is why he was paying Cohen for retainer fees, but really they were, according to the jury, allegedly, they were hiding these claims, or they were hiding the Stormy Daniels stuff to help his election and falsifying records. The 34th count is also falsifying business records in the first degree, but as it pertains to a check and check stub dated December 5th, 2017. I will now repeat for you the law pertaining to the crime of falsifying business records in the first degree in its entirety. So this is a repeat of everything we just read. New York election law, unlawful means, Federal Election Campaign Act. This is all, he repeats it one more time. Violation of tax laws, how to find him guilty, motive, when not element of crime. Let me explain how motive, and in particular the difference between motive and intent. Intent means conscious, objective, or purpose. Motive just means it would benefit you somehow, right? Intent means like you did it intentionally. Thus, a person commits a criminal act with the intent when that person's conscious, objective, or purpose is to engage in the act, which the law forbids, or to bring about an unlawful result. Motive, on the other hand, is the reason why a person chooses to engage in criminal conduct. If intent is an element of a charged crime, that element must be proved by the people beyond a reasonable doubt. In this case, intent is, as I've explained, an element of the crime of falsifying business records in the first degree. Motive, however, is not an element of the crimes charged. Therefore, the people are not required to prove motive for the commission of the charged crimes. Nevertheless, by the way, this whole argument started because I said the jury decided and they were unanimous. And someone in chat said, not with Trump! Not with Trump! Nope! Don't have to be unanimous with Trump! Do you see how silly that was now? And then they started screaming. Then another person came in and started screaming federal over and over again. You see how silly that is now? Like, he clearly told him it had to be a unanimous decision. The only part that they wanted to clip out was the part that says you don't have to be unanimous about why. Even, like, the unlawful means, which unlawful means, right? The only part they wanted to clip and post in chat was this part. You need not be unanimous as to what those unlawful means were. You see how deceptive it is to clip those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 words is, right? He literally says up here, although you must conclude unanimously that the defendant conspired to promote or prevent the election of any person to a public office by unlawful means. They want to leave all that out and say, you need not be unanimous as to what those unlawful means were. You see how clipping that out takes all the context out of it. And that's what they always do. That's what they all... Trump wasn't even allowed to call any witnesses. No. He was allowed to call any witness he fucking wanted. The judge specifically said, you can call this witness. The problem is, we agreed before the trial it would be in this scope. You agreed to it. You're not going to call him and go out of the scope you agreed to. And witnesses are often limited on the scope that they can testify in. So Trump says we are not allowed to use our election expert under any circumstances. Here's the actual facts. Trump was referring to campaign finance expert Bradley A. Smith, a law professor and former Republican member of the 5th Election Commission. Judge Juan M. Merchan did not bar Smith from testifying in any capacity. Trump's legal team chose not to call on him after the judge declined to broaden the scope of questioning that the defense could pursue. The ruling echoed his pretrial ruling on the matter, which limited what Smith could be asked about. Merchan said that, if called, Smith could give general background about the FEC. For example, its purpose, the laws it enforces, and provides definitions for such terms such as campaign contribution. He rejected that Trump's team's renewed efforts to have Smith define 3 terms in federal election law on the basis that doing so would breach rules preventing expert witnesses from interpreting the law. You cannot have anybody interpret the law for you. Right? That's why the law is given to you right here. And you can't have him interpret the law. That's against the law. To have someone, because who says that he's interpreting it right? Nobody. Nor could Smith opine on whether the informant's alleged actions violate the laws. So he couldn't come in and say, I don't think, I'm interpreting the law and I don't think he did anything wrong. But what does Trump say? We weren't allowed to have our witnesses testify at all. Under any circumstances. First time ever. This is huge. That wasn't it. It hasn't been it. Motive, on the other hand, is the reason why a person chooses to engage. Motive is not an element. Nevertheless, evidence of a motive or evidence of lack of a motive may be considered by the jury. For example, if you find from the evidence that the defendant had a motive to commit the crime charged, that is a circumstance you may wish to consider as tending to support a finding of guilt. Motive would be like his motive was to win the election. On the other hand, if the proof establishes that the defendant had no motive to commit the crime charged, that is a circumstance you may wish to consider as tending to establish that the defendant is not guilty of the crime as charged. Deliberations. Your verdict on each count you consider, whether guilty or not guilty, must be unanimous. Again, he reiterates, it must be unanimous. Each and every juror must agree. Not for Trump! Not for Trump! Enjoy your PTSD! Not for Trump! What? What do you mean, not for Trump? How many times does he have to say it to where you stop screaming, not for Trump? He literally goes over it again and again. What page are we on? I'm going to have to refresh this. 50? 49. There it is. Your verdict on each count you consider, whether guilty or not guilty, must be unanimous. That is, each and every juror must agree to it. To reach a unanimous verdict, you must deliberate with the other jurors. That means you should discuss the evidence and consult with each other. Listen to each other. Give each other's views careful consideration and reason together when considering the evidence. And when you deliberate, you should do so with a view towards reaching an agreement that if that can be done without surrendering individual judgment. Can you reach an agreement without surrendering your individual judgment? Each of you must decide the case for yourself, but only after a fair and impartial consideration of the evidence with the other jurors. You should not surrender an honest view of the evidence simply because you want the trial to end or because you are outvoted. At the same time, you should not hesitate to re-examine your views and change your mind if you become convinced that your position was not correct. I think this would probably be hard to do. A lot of people go in there probably thinking they know what's up. They're going to review the evidence, and it's just going to keep making them think the same thing they already think. And then when someone else votes against them, or it's split down the middle, or maybe they're the only person voting a certain way, I think they dig in. Like, you get defensive of your beliefs. You know what I mean? It would be hard to sit there and be like, well, if they make a good point, I'm going to change my mind, for a lot of people. Jury note taken. Some jurors took notes. Any notes taken are only an aid to your memory and must not be precedents over your independent recollection. Those jurors who choose not to take notes must rely on their own independent recollection and must not be influenced by any notes that another jury may have taken. Any notes you took are only for your own personal use and refreshing your recollection. A juror's notes are not suitable for the recorded transcript of the testimony or for any exhibit received in evidence. If there is a discrepancy between juror's recollection and his or her notes regarding the evidence, you should ask to have the relevant testimony read back or the exhibit produced in the jury room. In addition, a juror's note, I probably couldn't do it because if I'm not sitting in front of this mic or not doing something, hell, I just fall asleep like that. I think I'm narcoleptic or some shit. In addition, a juror's notes are not suitable for a detailed explanation. I've given you the principles of the law that govern this case. If there's a discrepancy between the juror's recollection and his or her notes regarding those principles, you should ask me to explain those principles again. By the way, when people are like, oh, it was so complicated, it was 55 pages. First of all, it wasn't that many pages. We saw how it was spaced. Second of all, 90% of it is all the same. They explain to you what guilty is. They explain to you innocent with. They explain to you what the people have to do. They explain to you what to do. It was just that small, like 2 pages, and then repeated 2 more pages. That was the part in question. And I think he did a good job explaining it, especially to have 2 lawyers in the room. Trump's legal team probably should have gotten rid of those lawyers, because if there was somebody in there that couldn't understand that, couldn't get it in their head that you don't have to agree on these laws that were broken, as long as you unanimously agree the overwhelming law was broken. I'm sure they're who explained it to them. Enjoy your PTSD. Federal exhibits, read back, and law questions. You may see any or all of the exhibits that were received in evidence. Simply write me a note. Tell me which exhibit or exhibits you want to see. You may also have the testimony of any witness read back to you in whole or in part. Again, if you want to read back, write me a note. And different states handle this differently. Some of them they can have like a video. They play video back to them. They can watch it again. If you're interested in hearing only a portion of witness testimony, please specify in your note which witness and with as much detail as possible which part of the testimony you want to hear. Of course, when testimony is read back, questions to which an objection was sustained and material otherwise struck from the record is not read back. Oh, someone said that earlier. If it's struck, then they don't read it back to you. If you have a question on the law, write me a note specifying what you want me to review with you. Four-person's role. Under our law, the first juror selected is known as the foreperson. During deliberations, the foreperson's opinion and vote are not entitled to any more importance than any other vote. What we ask the foreperson to do during deliberations is to sign any written note that the jury sends out of the court. The foreperson does not have to write the no or agree with its contents. The foreperson's signature indicates only that the writing comes from the jury. The foreperson may also chair the jury's discussions during deliberations. When the jury has reached its verdict, guilty or not guilty, the entire jury will be asked to come into the court. The foreperson will be asked whether the jury has reached a verdict. If the foreperson says yes, the foreperson will then be asked what the verdict is for each charged count. After that, the entire jury will be asked as to whether that is their verdict and will answer yes or no. Finally, upon the request of a party, each juror will be asked individually whether the announced verdict is the verdict of that juror. And upon being asked, each juror will answer yes or no. Verdict sheet. I will give you a form known as a verdict sheet. The verdict sheet lists each count submitted for your consideration and the possible verdicts. Please use the form to record your verdict with an X or a check mark in the appropriate place. And look, I used to do the same thing. When my political guy said something, I used to immediately believe it. And then when I would go and Google stuff, I would go look specifically for that, other people that agreed with me. Then I started looking at the other side, and this shit just didn't add up. It just, both sides can't be right, and both sides are screaming they're right. But once you get down to this, it seems like it's a lot of common sense. I don't know if he's guilty or not. I didn't hear 99% of the evidence. All I've read is articles that happened before it or what. We didn't hear any of the evidence. But I know that we trust our system to take somebody, indict them, charge them, take them to court, and give them 12 people to hear everything and go through it. And we trust this system all the time, but not when my guy's convicted. Not when my guy's convicted. But I guarantee you there's somebody on their Facebook page that they scroll through or their Instagram or whatever, and they're like, that motherfucker, I remember when he was strung out on dope or got convicted for selling or stole a car or what. That stupid piece of shit. He'll always be a piece of shit. They never think, well, was the jury's against him? Well, did the judge confuse them when he read them the tenets of the law? Well, that's federal! Never. If it's somebody they like, the whole system's rigged. If it's somebody they went to school with and give two fucks about, they're like, well, that's justice for you. In addition to listing the counts, I've added some additional language on the verdict sheet in order to distinguish the counts. You will notice that I have indicated whether a count pertains to an invoice or a voucher or a check. For invoices, I've added the date, and for the vouchers and checks, I've added the number. The sole reason for doing this is to help you distinguish between various counts. It is not a substitute for my full instructions on the meaning and elements of each charge, and it should not discourage you from asking me to define a crime again if a question about it arises. Jury deliberations. Finally, there are a few remaining rules which you must observe during deliberations. While you are in the courthouse deliberating on a case, you will be kept together in a jury room. You may not leave the jury room during deliberations. Lunch will, of course, be provided. If you have a cell phone or other electronic device, please give it to the court officer to hold for you while you're engaged in deliberations. You must deliberate about the case only when you are all gathered together in the jury room. You must not, for example, discuss the case as you go to and from the courtroom. It is important that each juror have the opportunity to hear whatever another juror has to say about the case, and that by law must only be done when you are all gathered together in the jury room. Thus, if for any reason all 12 of you are not gathered in the jury room, please stop deliberating until all are present, so bathroom breaks or whatever. During your deliberations, you must discuss this case. He doesn't have to be convicted. I don't know how many more times I can say this. He doesn't have to. Intent. Intent. If I have an intent to kill you and that causes me to violate a conspiracy law, does that mean I have to be convicted of killing you? If I get conspiracy to commit a murder and it's based on my intent to hire a hitman and kill you, does that mean you have to be dead? Or the hitman even had to try? Intent. He doesn't have to be convicted. Federal or not. During your deliberations, you discuss the case only among yourselves. You must not discuss the case with anyone else, including a court officer, or permit anyone other than a fellow juror to discuss the case in your presence. If you have a question or request, you must communicate with me by writing a note, which you will give to a court officer to give to me. The law requires that you communicate with me in writing in part to make sure there are no misunderstandings. We will work every day until about 4:30. However, we can work later if the jury wishes to do so and all jurors are in agreement. Simply send me a note as early in the day as possible. Let me know that you wish to stay beyond 4:30, and if so, what time you would like to work until. Depending on the time you select, we may order dinner for you. Ooh, get some good dinner. Bow, 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 bow. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. You can. If you can't improve intent, then you can never prove intent. Is that what you're saying? You can prove intent. It's one of the tenets of a lot of our laws. You're saying you don't believe whatever. It literally showed you how to prove intent. You have to infer by everything around it, the communications made, any written documents, the testimony, his state of mind, not outside of motive. It doesn't have to have motive, but it can include motive. We just read it. You can't prove intent. They're the tenets of a lot of our laws. Intent. We may order dinner for you. Get a good dinner. I should explain that under our law, I'm not permitted to have a conversation about the facts of the case or a possible verdict or the vote of the jury on any count with any one juror or a group of jurors or even all jurors. Thus, in any note that you send with me, do not tell me what the vote of the jury is on any account. On any count. If a juror wants to speak with me during the deliberations, a meeting here in the courtroom with all parties will be arranged. No juror, however, can tell me what is being said about the facts of the case or a possible verdict or what the vote of any juror or the jury is on any count. And while I will, of course, listen to whatever a jury has to say that does not involve those subjects, I may not be able to respond to that juror if the response involves instructions on the law. I may be required to call into the court the entire jury and respond by speaking to the entire jury. The reason for that is that our law wants to make sure that each and every juror hears at exactly the same time whatever I have to say about law. Our law wants to make sure that the jury hears those instructions from me and not from another juror. That concludes my instructions on the law. It's all federal. No, that's true. But if you bought a firearm, you told somebody, I'm going to buy a firearm, go scope out banks for me, and then you get busted with fucking the work schedule of all the bank tellers and the layout of the bank and a plan that says this is how I'm going to rob the bank, that's intent to rob a bank. You don't, it's not robbing the bank. It's intent. It's intent. You can prove intent in crimes. There's instructions on how to prove intent. I don't know why you can't understand it, but there's instructions laid out. This is how you prove intent. It literally tells us what intent is in these instructions. You're just wrong. He didn't have to violate an election law. Again, we're back to the same fucking argument. Intent. Intent can be proven. You must decide if the required intent can be inferred beyond a reasonable doubt from the proven facts. In doing so, you may consider the person's conduct and all the circumstances surrounding that conduct. This is literally, intent means conscious objective or purpose. Thus, a person acts with intent to defraud when his or her conscious objective or purpose is to do so. Intent does not require premeditation. In other words, intent does not require advanced planning, nor is it necessary that the intent be in the person's mind for any particular period of time. The intent can be formed and need only exist at the very moment the person engages in prohibited conduct or acts to cause the prohibited results, and is not at an earlier time. The question naturally arises of how to determine whether the defendant had the intent required for the commission of a crime. To make that determination in the case, you must decide if the required intent can be inferred beyond a reasonable doubt from the proven facts. In doing so, you may consider the person's conduct and all of the circumstances surrounding the conduct, including but not limited to the following. What, if anything, did the person say or do? What result, if any, followed the person's conduct? And was that result the natural, necessary, and probable consequences of that conduct? Therefore, in this case, from the facts you find to have been proven, decide whether you can infer beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant had the intent required for the commission of the crime. It doesn't say, did they commit the crime? Did they have the intent? I don't know why that's so hard for you. It seems like you're really struggling, but there's a whole page. It's page 41 that tells you, how do we decide intent? And this would be the same in any fucking crime that requires intent. I don't have to murder somebody to be charged with conspiracy, which means I intended to commit murder. But if they catch me with a gun, I've instructed somebody to start following you around because I'm going to fucking murder you, or because I'm going to take care of you when I can find you out somewhere. And that's conspiracy to commit a murder. And I don't have to commit the murder. If you can't get through page 41, I can't help you with it. It doesn't. It doesn't. You don't have to be convicted of a crime. No one has to convict you of murder or even indict me. No one has to indict me on murder charges. The federal government doesn't have to indict me on murder charges to get me with conspiracy that includes intent to murder someone. It never has, never will. That's the difference. It's 1:11, guys. I'm out of here. I think you did a pretty good job. You guys can read these yourself by just looking up jury instructions for the Trump case. They're all published. They're all federal. I love how you went from screaming federal to intent. But thank you guys for joining. And by the way, he doesn't even have to break the you realize there's two other laws. There's a tax law and there's falsifying other records. That they even if you can't wrap your head around he had intent to break the law but didn't break the law, so he had no intent. There's two other ones that they could have voted on. Tax violation of state and or federal, and falsifying other records. And it doesn't matter if he actually did it, as long as he had an intent to do it. Thank you guys for joining us. I appreciate it. Thank you for hanging out with me. Sorry for my PTSD, I guess. I'm having fun living with it, though. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to hop off here. Support the show while we're offline. Colbert.fun. We might do something fun tomorrow since it's Sunday. Something different. We'll see everybody on the next one. Have a good one. It doesn't matter. It's not that he's convicted of tax law. It's that he falsified documents with the intent to violate tax law. You cannot get through this. You cannot do this. You cannot. Go back to federal. It was a better argument. See you guys on the next one.
But I can tell you this about if this douchebag happens to see this particular show, you don't have the fork and balls to call out the people on this planet by name and tell them exactly who they are and tell them the rest of the world who they are. You don't have the fork and balls. You don't have the balls.
Okay, Scott. Here we go. I think I started some shit. Listen off, it's about to get lit. Get the place in the best, you know that stage is set. You better buckle up, cause you ain't seen nothing yet. Here we go.
Grounds.
Some
Grounds.
off, it's about to get lit. Get the place in the best, you know that stage is set. You better buckle up, cause you ain't seen nothing yet. And they say that I'm a lunatic. Well, listen.
The reason it's in the first degree is you did it with the intent to break any other law in the world. Any law. Littering, jaywalking, it doesn't matter. The three laws that they proposed were taxes, falsifying other records, and Federal Election Commission violation. He didn't have to break those. He just had to have an. The reason he did A is because he had an intent to do B1, B2, or B3, and you can pick any of them. Jurisdiction is the best one. I have less of a headache than when I cover Derek Johnson, at least. So that's good.
Here we go. I think I started some shit. Piss them off, it's about to get lit. Get the place in the best, you know that stage is set.
God mods.
Buckle up, cause
You guys suck, but you're trying.
here we go, I think I started some shit.
Split the show while we're offline. Cobra.fund.
Get lit,
So he can be around for a while.
you know that stage.
Might just disappear. Who knows? Fuck it.
Cause you ain't seen nothing yet. I used to find clues too when I was high on shrooms. I found myself a tunnel that led to Jason Q's bedroom. Opened his closet, I found some of his meat rockets. I strapped it to my shoes and then I flew through the roof. I found myself in orbit strapped to an F-16. High on amphetamine with Trump in between. Put on a light coat of baby oil and saluted the troops. He tapped me on the shoulder and said, this is gonna be it.
Of course, legend. And now we're all wondering where Austin is. I see how this played out. You were just waiting for me to cover this intent, weren't you?
Dude, come on. Seriously. My mom's an alcoholic. Oh, give me a... Oh, my God.
I had to finance my left testicle for a goddamn chair. It'll be here Monday.
Piss them off, it's about to get lit. Get the place in the best, you know that stage is set. You better buckle up,